Hello, 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 folks. How we doing? Hey, Celeste. Hey, Thirsty. We're gonna get started here in about 1 minute. I hope everybody's having a great weekend so far. I think I am. It's a good day for streaming.
But it's clear that it must begin.
Okay, folks. How's my audio quality? Can everybody hear me okay? Hey, jump in. Welcome. Perfect timing, jumping. Hey, Copper Lily. Sounds good? Okay, good stuff. Yeah, I'm not sure why my intro music cut out a little early there. Still kind of working out the kinks, but we'll get there eventually. It's only my second time using Streamlabs. Alrighty, folks. So we're going to go ahead and get started here in just a minute. So if anybody wants or needs closed captioning, you can turn that on by hovering your mouse over the right side of your screen and then clicking on the CC icon. That should pop up. We should have live generated captions working now. Hey, Adele, good to see ya. Alrighty, so really interesting topic today, I think, which should it's something that I'd never used before, and I'm curious if there's anybody else in chat that has used this, but I know a lot of the times I recommend Netlify for site hosting, and 100 Devs kind of generally recommends Netlify for site hosting. And Netlify is fantastic. You know, it's got a really generous free tier. You've got a lot of options as far as, you know, how you want to deploy your site. You can deploy directly from GitHub. It's really convenient. But the challenge with that is that if you have truly built a full stack app, meaning that you are, you know, making requests from a front end and then you want to have some kind of a server to process those requests and send them to an API or to a database, I was previously under the impression that there was no way to do that with Netlify, that Netlify simply wasn't, that you could only do static sites with Netlify. And it turns out that that is not the case. Over the past week, I've learned a lot about what are called Netlify functions. And with Netlify functions, you can essentially take your previously static or take your like Node and Express based site and convert it into serverless functions. So convert your server into serverless functions and then still perform all the operations that you would, all the CRUD operations, all the communications to Supabase or MongoDB or your APIs or whatever, using Netlify functions, and you can still host it for free on Netlify. So Netlify functions are also free. There is like a limit on the amount of calls you can do and the amount of function calculation time you can have, but it's ridiculously high. And as a, you know, as a freelancer or as a single user, you're probably never going to hit it. So Jump In says, I wish there was more free options for full stack apps. Yeah, well, hopefully today you're going to learn a little bit more about an option you may not have used before. Hey, Angel Codes, welcome. Good to have you here. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Oh, and before I forget, also, I want somebody else subscribe to me, and I apologize, I can't see you on my feed. About 6 days ago, somebody, I believe their name was Lily, they subbed to me. So thank you, Lily. I really appreciate that. It's very kind of you. Hey, Interplanet. They say afternoon chat, happy day of the dads and family unity. Yeah, it is Father's Day. Yep, I called my dad this morning, so I hope if you have someone who is your father or someone who you look up to in that regard, doesn't have to be a biological father, then I hope that, you know, you're able to give them a thank you today. Hey, Dan. Oh, we got a lot of folks here. Uh, Hey, Fifth Dissy. Hey, Angel Codes. Oh, thank you, Angel. You have one for tech, now one for gaming. Had to make sure to follow. Oh, and thank you so much for the subscription, Copper Lily. I don't have my sub. I didn't have time this week to get my custom sub screen set up. Again, apologies for that, but I can give you the generic one. Thank you, Copper Lily. Really appreciate it. Always good to have you here. Oh yeah. Oh, you're in class 45, Angel. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure we've got other catch up crew folks here in chat today. There's a wolf in the I know, there's a wolf in the animation. Isn't that cool? I love it. It's great. Yeah, it's a really beautiful template, I think. Yeah. Um Quirky says, like the new look. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was kind of a forced change given that Twitch decided to discontinue Twitch Studio at the end of May, which was the platform I'd been using for the past 2 years. And so I had to learn how to use Streamlabs real quick. So we're still getting there. Not everything's perfect yet. I don't have everything configured exactly the way I want, but it's not too bad. It's all right. I'll live with it. Um, Visha says, I used Netlify serverless functions 2 or 3 years ago for a website that I built for a cancer charity. Oh, lovely. I use them to communicate with Stripe and with a shipping API. Yeah, so today we're going to just, this is going to be a gentle introduction. And Visha, if you have any comments or if I get something wrong or if there's something that's unclear and you want to, lend your knowledge as much as you remember, feel free to do so. You're never going to, I love it when we have experts here in chat on whatever we're talking about. We get a lot of great smart people in chat. Oh my goodness, thank you, Mark Wright. I'm glad that alert worked. Thank you so much for the sub, Mark. Hello. Yeah, so Visha, if there's anything you want to add to the discussion, feel free to. We get a lot of wonderful experts here in chat on the topics that we're talking about, and so I love it when people do lend their expertise as long as it's done in a respectful manner. I'm never going to be like, I'm never, don't worry about stepping on toes or anything like that. Feel free to share what you know because that's how we all learn, right? So, yeah, I just want to put that out there. And yeah, that's awesome. You were able to use serverless functions for a production application using Stripe and a shipping API. Yeah. And so today, like, it's going to be a gentle introduction. I'm just really just going to show you how I've already implemented Netlify functions for the app that we worked on last week, which is this grave registry search. So what it is, it's a very simple front end using EJS, and the back end is just a Supabase cloud SQL database. So it's just communicating back and forth with Supabase, and I'll show you how I've implemented serverless functions to essentially take what was originally your standard Node Express app and move that and host it live on Netlify with serverless functions for free. Quirky says they're on class 31, working on projects and cybersecurity. Nice, that's awesome. Celeste says, how did your presentation go? Oh, yeah. So the app, I was called in to present the app, or at least the current version of the app on Wednesday for the committee for the local museum that this app is going to be for. And they were like, this is magical, this is amazing, we love this. It was just universal praise, and so that was, I really have enjoyed volunteering for this museum, and I'm really glad that I was able to use my technical skills to benefit this, sort of historic artistic sort of endeavor. So I love that. That's a wonderful crossover of technology and history and art. And I think that, it's important for us to remember that we have these skills, even if you're just starting out, right? Even if you're in the catch-up crew, even if you have just built your first ever web page in HTML, it's important to remember that you now have skills that 99% of the regular population does not. Just you having the ability to build a static website is more than almost anyone else can do. And so if you can think of a way to leverage those skills to help someone else or to, make life easier for someone, then that's a wonderful way you can apply those skills. The app that I built, it's not complex. I'll go to it now. And it's not particularly, visually astounding. It's just a very plain site. But what it does is make it easier for people to find their relatives in a cemetery, and that's a big deal for a lot of people. Yeah. Oh, of course, Visha. There's no requirement for you to share your knowledge. I'm just saying if you wanted to, but no, I never require people to share. To contribute to the discussion. Not at all. Feel free to just listen in. That's perfectly fine. No worries at all, Visha. Angel says, I've only ever dragged and dropped on Netlify. Is there a CLI push? So the way that I generally deploy on Netlify is I generally deploy directly from GitHub. I don't know if you ever do that. So the CLI, the way I deploy is essentially through the CLI. I've linked the GitHub repository directly to Netlify. And so when I do my push from the command line in VS Code, when I do my git push to my GitHub repository, it's automatically going to trigger a deploy on Netlify. So Netlify does have its own command line interface, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And you can deploy from there, definitely. But I just generally go the GitHub route. Dan says, I hoard mine like precious gold coins. I may or may not have any coins. Oh, you are helpful, Dan. But the very first thing we're going to do, and since y'all are early birds into the stream, we get to have a little bit of fun here at the start of the stream. So as always, I'm going to anonymize. So right now I've got real data loaded into the application. And so the very first thing we're going to do here is we're going to anonymize it by blanking out the last names of the folks that are stored in this data set. So I'm going to show you get a little as a reward for being early, you get a little extra bonus. You get to learn a little bit of SQL if you didn't know SQL already. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to programmatically wipe the last names of all the folks in the database or in the table using a SQL command. So it's very simple to do, but this isn't. And what I'm going to show you right now is an example of what you should not do, and we'll talk about why that is. But I'm going to say update, and my table is called Rave Registry, and I want to set the surname field. I'm just going to set it to X, which is what we did last time. Oh, hey, D. Kirsch. Saludos from Mexico. Hola. I hope your weekend is going well. Welcome. Good to have you here. So what I've just done here is what this is going to do is it's going to update my table, and it's going to set every record in the surname field to X. Now, I'm sure you can probably tell if I was working with, like, say, production data in a real database, why this would be not a thing you would want to do. Generally, what I would be doing is if I was writing any kind of an update function, I would have a where clause, which would limit the amount of records I'm updating to only the ones that I actually want to update, right? Generally, if I'm updating a record in a table, I would have a where clause and say something like where ID equals, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then that would ensure that I'm only updating one single record to set that last name to X. But in this case, I want to do a mass update of everything in the table, so I'm just going to run this wide open. And now I don't remember if it's going to warn me or not, but we'll see. Let's see, what did I do here? Surname, oh, did I spell that wrong? Hang on. I've already done this once, so we'll run the previous query that I ran before. There we go. So what did I spell something wrong? Huh. I guess I just didn't like that. That's right. In Supabase and Postgres, you have to enclose field names in quotes. That's not something that I have to do normally. And when I do like Oracle SQL for work, I just forgot that you have to enclose the field name in double quotes. But anyway, what we've done here is notice it didn't even warn me. But if I now do a select star on that table, get everything. Now you'll see that every single last name in the table has been set to X. So as you're learning SQL, just be very careful. Make sure that whenever you're performing any operation that is either an update or a delete, or that's going to it's going to affect existing records, make sure that you are putting some kind of a filter on it. In many cases, that would be a where clause, and make sure that you're only targeting the records you want to target. Oh, congratulations, Adele. I'm glad you fixed the bug you were working on. That's awesome. Way to go. Yeah, it's always a great feeling, right, when you fix a bug. When I was deploying this app to Netlify functions, I was just banging my head against a particular, specific bug I was facing. And yeah, when you solve it, it's just like, yes, I'm the best. It's a great feeling, I know. All right, so our data should be prepared. This is the data that's currently in the table in my Supabase database. And let me think where I want to start here. The other thing I do want to show you is a couple of useful things with Netlify, I think. Awesome, Mark. That's great. 7 stream streak. Get some good channel points for that. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Previously, I mentioned also that there is such thing as a Netlify command line interface, and I'll show you that as well. And so what's useful about the Netlify CLI is if you know you're going to be deploying your site to Netlify, you can use their command line interface to essentially run like a dev version of Netlify. And it almost works like NodeMon. If you're familiar with NodeMon, if you're used to running Node apps, you can install a package called NodeMon, which essentially reloads your application every time you make a change, and it incorporates those changes so you can rapidly test things. If you're trying to solve something, if you're doing a bunch of console logs, you can just save, and it'll refresh your application. And Netlify CLI essentially allows you to do the same thing, except it's configured to work with Netlify's architecture. So you can essentially see how your application would behave after you've hosted it on Netlify, except you don't have to keep doing deployments all the time. Like you don't have to keep pushing to GitHub multiple times a minute in order to see how that actually looks in the browser. You can run it like you would, something in NodeMon, like in localhost, except it's going to behave as if it was hosted on Netlify. And so that's how I did a lot of the debugging for the work that I've done today, is using the Netlify CLI. And then when I push it up to Netlify, it just works. Freedom says, is Netlify useful with Python or only JavaScripts? Oh, no worries, Freedom Dow. It's good to have you here. Yeah. So I know that Netlify does work with multiple languages, but I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure with Python. I actually don't have any experience with Python. But if anybody in the chat does, and they've done something with Python in Netlify, feel free to jump in. Jumpin' Joe says, that's awesome. I hate deploying from GitHub. I feel like it always gives me issues. Yeah, so you can kind of root out those issues by running it in essentially a dev Netlify environment prior to doing your push. Yeah, that's kind of the issue that I was encountering, Jumpin', is I was deploying and just running into issue after issue with my functions, and I was like, man, this is taking so long, like I don't like this. And so I decided to use the CLI, and then it went much faster because I could just do all my debugging from there. So essentially what you're doing is, you're running you're running a local dev server here, and I just installed it globally. So that way, you can use it from wherever, but it's up to you. You can install it on a project to project basis if you want. And let me see, I think there was, and that was really it. As far as I remember, all I had to do was just install the Netlify CLI, and then it added a couple of extra folders to my project, which if we go to the right one here, it added I believe it added this folder here, this .netlify folder. And it's just but then it also, added those to the git ignore as well. So you don't really have to worry about it or think about it. And you can also add I believe it also added this denolock file, and I think you can also add like a local config file as well. But as we'll see, this looks like a lot of files right here, right? This looks like a lot of files. But when we actually look at the deployment, when you actually deploy to Netlify, there's some things you'll need to take into consideration about what Netlify is actually going to deploy, especially when you're talking in terms of like full stack applications, what Netlify actually looks at and what it absolutely ignores. Hey, Phil, good to see ya. Welcome. All right, so Netlify CLI, highly recommended. If you want to read more about it, I'll put the links here in chat. So if you know you're going to be deploying to Netlify, I would just run it in the command line, make sure it's going to work. For static sites, that's probably not a big deal, right? If it's going to work, if a static site works in the browser, it's probably going to be fine on Netlify. But if you are doing something with functions or something that's Netlify specific, if you're converting a full stack application to serverless, I would highly recommend running it in the CLI first in a dev environment. Okay, so that's the command line. And next, I want to talk about how we actually convert a full stack application into a serverless application. And so what does it mean by serverless? So when you're running something, with Node and Express, you generally have like a server.js file, right? And that's where you're hosting your routes, that's where you're hosting your controllers. That's kind of your server serves as like an API, as like a middleman between the client and your backend, whatever that might be. Maybe it's another API, maybe it's a database, whatever. And the traditional dichotomy is that you can host your client side, your front end, on something like Netlify, and then you would have to host your server somewhere else, and then send those requests between the two. But Netlify gives us the option of making our application serverless. Now, serverless is maybe a little bit of a misnomer in that the functions have got to run somewhere, right? They're running on somebody's server. They're just not running on yours. And so what is actually happening there is that when you bundle up your say your controllers, what's on your server, yeah, it's yeah. Freedom says yeah, it's a server. Exactly. That's what when people say like stuff's in the cloud or whatever. Okay, yeah, but it's still running on hardware somewhere. And so serverless means it's not on your server. Yeah, exactly. It's run well, where so the question is, where is it actually running? And so when you are packaging up these functions and you're going and you're building out your Netlify functions, what's actually happening is they're being bundled and run in AWS. And you're converting them in actually what are called Lambda functions. And these are running code without provisioning or managing servers. And essentially Netlify is sending those requests out to Amazon's servers as prepackaged functions. Amazon's executing that and then sending the result back. And so Netlify just kind of routing the data, right? But essentially what you're doing is you're packaging up your server controllers into, essentially gift wrap functions, and then Netlify is just punting them over to be executed as Lambda functions, and then Amazon's punting the result back, and there you go. That's how it works. That's how something like Netlify, which is built to run static pages, can run these controllers, essentially server controllers. Yeah. And so if you're looking for documentation, Netlify does have some documentation on functions in their docs, and I'll put the link for this if you want to read about it. But I would say if you're looking for really technical specifics, I would recommend going to Amazon's Lambda function documentation directly, because that's essentially what you're doing. Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's a great point, D. Kirsch. Netlify is doing the work for you here. You don't have to spin up your own Lambda, environment, create your own connections to AWS. Netlify is doing that for you. And so don't get me wrong, I think this is a great solution. I really, really like it. I just want to be clear about what's actually happening here, right? Like Netlify is provisioning the resources that you need and, getting things set up for you. And then the calculations are actually happening here. So just so you're aware of that. And if you want to, like I say, if you want, technical documentation on how to build Lambda functions, I would recommend going to AWS. And I'll put the link for that as well. Freedom says, I built a Lambda first time ever the other day. You have to keep the image size a certain limit. Yeah, I mean, and I think Netlify, I'm not sure about limits or whatever necessarily. Netlify, I think, does lay out the limits to what you can and can't do, especially in the free tier, how many requests you can make, how much processing time you can use to remain within the free tier. Like I said, I think that most of you out there in the audience probably wouldn't come close to hitting it. I've been, testing this site pretty hard for the past couple days, and I looked to see how many requests I had remaining, and it was still like I'd only used like 5% of my request volume for the month. So there's no way that I'm going to hit it. This app will never ever hit the cap on the free tier. um Oh, I gotta catch up with chat here. Da, da, da. Quirky says, Netlify can run Python apps. I usually use a Docker file. Maybe I'll give that a shot soon. Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I'm still kind of thinking about how to implement lambdas to split into more than one function, or it's just not a solution for what I'm testing. So Freedom, actually, I'll show you. I have multiple lambda functions going in my app, essentially for each controller on my server. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're asking, but for each controller on my server, I split that out into a separate lambda, and then we're just calling whichever one is needed at that point to execute the task. So kind of like you have separate controllers in your server. Yeah, Freedom, you can use more than one function. Yeah. Hey, Ras, good to see you. Oh, you're doing quantum calculations? Holy cow. Yeah, that'll hit some limits. Definitely, I'm sure. That's wild. What are y'all doing out there? Okay, so I gave you the links for the documentation. We're going to be essentially building out these Netlify functions. And uh, you can kind of get a cursory overview here in the Netlify documentation, but if you want a deeper dive, I would suggest going straight to Amazon. Okay. So any questions before we actually get into how this looks and how these functions work? Also, if you're new, feel free to ask questions at any point. You're never going to interrupt me, or you're never going to be annoying, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. I like to remind people of that occasionally. I don't think I've mentioned it in a couple weeks. But yeah, there's no such thing as a stupid question or a silly question, because if you have that question, that probably means that multiple people out there in the audience have the same question. You were just the brave enough person to actually ask it. Okay? Cool. So also too, but before we get into the actual code itself, I want to show you what a function deployment looks like. Oh, hey, Holly, good to see you. Welcome back. I want to show you what a function-based deployment actually looks like. So if you are familiar with Netlify deployments, you've probably seen this screen before, right? You've probably seen this screen. It does the little 1, 2, 3, and then it deploys. So let's go ahead and look at, I'm actually just going to go in here. I'm going to look at this specific deployment, this most recent one that I did. And you'll see that something you may not have seen before is this, which is 7 functions deployed. Ras, because I guess if only my mom's and a potential recruiter visit my website, I'll hit pretty often cold starts. I don't remember reading anything about them, suspending your, like Netlify suspending your project or anything like that. Supabase will suspend your project if you're using Supabase as a backend. So something to be aware of there. If you're using the free tier of Supabase, it will suspend after 1 week. So you either need to set up a timed API call or whatever to hit it, or just make sure that you hit your project or even log into your project once a week. So hey, Snowy Panda, good to see you. All right, so let's look at this deploy summary here. You'll notice that we've got 7 functions deployed. And I also want to take a look down here and we're going to look at what those functions look like in Netlify in a minute. But I also want to look down here at the file browser. So this is maybe something that maybe you've never looked at before, to see specifically which files Netlify actually recognizes. Because if you've only ever deployed static sites on Netlify, you probably have your HTML files in your public folder, right? They're probably in a public folder because that's where you put your static assets, and you got your images in your public folder too, right? And so Netlify is going to pick up the public folder by default. But it becomes a little bit more of a challenge. You'll notice that it really only picks up the public folder, right? If we head back to my actual project, I've got way more going on than that. Obviously I've got my functions folder. That's where it's picking up my functions from. But, I've got my local Netlify config. I've got my node modules, public folder, but then I've got all these other, files here. And if you had structured, let's say you'd originally built your project in Node, if you had, say, like EJS files, where would those normally go? Where would those normally go? If you had built a full stack app using Node and Express, yeah, you would probably have them, you would have your static files in a public folder, and then you would have your, say, like your EJS files or your handlebars files or whatever, you would have those in a separate views folder, right? And so did I originally when I first deployed this. And it kept saying, it would load my site and it would just say server error, file not found, right? Your view couldn't find folder views index.ejs, whatever. And that kept happening until I realized I actually looked down here at the actual deployment contents, and Netlify does not care about anything else outside of the public folder. It absolutely, it willfully ignores anything outside of the public folder. And so if I wanted to have my views, I needed to put them inside of my public folder. You'll see that I've got my views in here, index, login, and an update. So something to be aware of. If you are deploying a full stack app and you have non-static files, you may have to put them into the public folder. Now, to be fair, I've only worked with this for a week. There are ways to include other files into your deployment to make Netlify recognize them. But this is really the only way that I could get Netlify to actually include my views in the deployment, was to put them into my public folder. Okay. Oh, no worries, Instinct. Good to see you here. Good to have you here. Thanks for coming. So just to be aware, you're going to have to change your structure a little bit. And just including your views in the public folder isn't going to make Netlify recognize them as such. And so I'm going to show you something else I had to do. And this is something that you're going to have to do for any Netlify full stack deployment. You're going to have to, that's the wrong one, sorry. You're going to have to include a netlify.toml file. So your netlify.toml file is kind of like a config file for Netlify deployments. So not like a local config, but like config for Netlify deployments. And so by default, I think you're going to have, essentially you're going to, you got your build folder here. This is saying to publish the public folder. And then you're also going to have to give it the location of your Netlify functions. And then, since I wanted to include this second layer with my views folder in it, I had to explicitly say, grab these files and pass them into my functions. I had to tell my functions where those files live. Okay? I had to explicitly declare exactly where my views lived in order to pass them into my functions. So if you think about it in terms of, Angel says, will this be on your YouTube later? Yes, it will be. I'm moving some files over now. I won't have a stream next weekend. I won't have a stream next weekend because of a family thing. So I'm going to be uploading a bunch of stuff to YouTube. So if you are, yeah, no worries, Angel. And no, we're going through a lot here. And so if anybody needs me to go over something again, please ask me to repeat, and I'm happy to do that. But you're also welcome to watch the recording, which is on Twitch. And you can actually go back and rewind right now if you want to. And then it will move to YouTube as well. I'm going to be moving a bunch of stuff next weekend. So you always have the ability to rewind, to replay, and to watch stuff on YouTube later. Okay. So, couple things to note, right? If I wanted to deploy my full stack app, there's a couple things I need to do just to summarize. I need to add a netlify.toml file at the root of my project. You can see I'm in the root folder here. Had to add that. And then in that Netlify TOML file, I had to add build instructions. I had to tell it where my where my production files were. And I also had to tell it where my functions were. And I had to tell those functions where my views were. I had to tell those functions where my views were. Now, if you're familiar with React, you can think about it. You can think about functions a little bit like React components. If I am building out a React project and I want to make information available inside of a component, what do I have to do? Yeah, Ahmed, you have to pass props, right? Well, that's another thing, Holly. Exactly. We're going to see that in a minute too. If you're familiar with React, you're going to find a lot of similarities in these functions. One of those things is, yeah, how you get information into these components is, hey, TV and Rask, I understand you're having a discussion there, but remember to keep things civil and let's try to keep it roughly on topic to what we're covering today, okay? There's no need to have a flame war in the chat. Thanks, guys. You can feel free to take it to the PMs. I'm not going to stop you, but keep it chill. All right, so you can think of functions very similar to React components. In that, one of the things about React components, right, is that by their definition, they are self-contained, right? They're self-contained. They can't talk to each other, and they don't know anything that's going on outside of them. And in particular, right, exactly. And in particular, with regards to functions, they are literally self-contained because each request, each function is being sent off to Amazon web servers individually. So each function is truly self-contained and it's being sent off to Amazon separately as a different request each time. Okay, so you have to, if you want the function to understand something, like where something is located, by default, that function is going to have no concept of where stuff is. You're going to have to tell it. And so essentially, just like with a React component, we have to tell it exactly where stuff lives. And in this case, it needs to know where my view files are stored, right? Because it's going to need to render out my index.html or my index.ejs, my login page, my logout page. It's going to need to know where those are. And so we have to pass those in as kind of like a global prop. And so if you understand a little bit about how these functions are actually executed, that starts to make a little bit of sense. If you're used to working with node functions, you might be like, well, the files are right there. They're in my public folder. Why can't this function see them? But since these functions are standalone and being executed standalone way off in Amazon somewhere, we have to provide this information so the function knows where stuff is related to itself. Okay. So I'm spending more time on that just because it's sort of counterintuitive to how we normally develop things. And so it's important to remember what's actually happening here. And then also, obviously we've got our Netlify functions folder. So if I go into my Netlify folder here, in my functions, this is where all of my functions live now. Essentially, these are all my controllers. So in my server.js, I had multiple controllers for rendering my pages. Yeah, and I'm sure Netlify servers are on AWS anyways, right? But each of the functions is still being treated as an individual entity, right? It's being treated as an individual goober that gets sent off and executed independently of anything else. And so essentially these are each of my controllers now rendered out as individual functions, just like you would do with a React component. That's that's one of the tenets of React, is that you break out these tasks. You break out these tasks into individual files, which each one containing a component, and each one needs to be self-contained. It needs to take in an input and needs to return something. And execute a single logical kind of operation. And that's really what we're doing here. It needs a cloud pointer. But all right. So that's kind of the new setup that we have here. So when we deploy, Netlify reads our public folder. It locates the functions in our functions folder. And it also passes the location of any other files that we need. And it doesn't have to be views. It could be, let's say that you are, I don't know, reading from a spreadsheet, heaven forbid, directly into your application. It happens, right? You've got a hard-coded spreadsheet or a CSV file or a text file that you're, with some configuration stuff that you want to read into your application. You would need to explicitly include that and pass it into your functions. All right, and so if we go back here to our deployment, we'll see it's grabbed all this information. It knows where everything is, and it has captured all 7 of our functions. And the nice thing about these functions is that each one of them is now keeping individual logs within Netlify. So this can be hugely helpful in troubleshooting. Rather than having to console log directly from your like server.js and try to figure out which function is throwing the error or whatever, you can look at the logs and click on functions and see each one of your functions independently. So for example, let's look at just our simple one here, render index. If I click in here, I will see individualized logs for just those individual functions. Like whatever function I clicked on, I will see the logs only related to the operations of that function. So if let me go here, I'm going to reload this. We should see that log fire off. Yeah, there we go. So it's telling me exactly what's happening with that function. And if there's an error, it will log it in red right there for that particular function. So you can tell exactly what's misbehaving. You can still console log if you want. That's going to work. And when you console log, it's going to you can put like custom console logs into the log for this function just by adding them inside the function body. But it is nice to be able to see what your individual functions are doing without having to parse out where the issue is coming from. Michael says, you like this more than Vercel? I actually never used Vercel. This is, I've never really had the cause to use Vercel. And for me anyway, I like this because I was already familiar with Netlify from hosting static sites. And it's free and it's easy to use for the most part. So if someone has used Vercel and wants to draw a comparison, they are welcome to. You can see it's doing, more stuff there. But personally, I can't really make a comparison because I haven't really used Vercel at all. But I like it because, I already know how to use Netlify. And so if I can host my full stack apps here too, I certainly am going to. Fewer dashboards is nice, right? And it's free. Also, the CEO or the co-founder of Netlify retweeted my tweet today and followed me on Twitter. So I'm sold. There are limits to the free tier. Let me see if I can remember where that is. Oh, usage and billing. Yeah, it's down here. So you can see limits to well, you can link down here. Functions pricing. No, it's not there. I saw a table somewhere. Oh, site configure. Oh, here we go. Functions overview and usage. You can see how much you've used. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Configuration and usage. Yeah. So on the free tier, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. On the free tier, you get 125,000 requests, and I've used 103. I've done 100. Per day. I believe it's per month. So June 7th to July 7th. But you can see it's plenty of requests, and the calculation time is 100 hours. Yeah. So for most applications, I think you're going to be fine. Yeah. And you can read more about pricing and usage Yeah, here we go. That's good to start. Definitely. If you need more, you can pay for it. I mean, it's, well, your client should be paying for it, right? Hopefully. So I'll put a link there in chat if you want to read more about pricing. I'll let folks look at that on their own. Yeah. No cloud for you, sure. It's always another one's computer anyway. Definitely. Ras says isn't making the view public a bit dangerous. I mean, it includes business logic that should be done on the server only. Yeah. So that's why I mentioned I do want to figure out how to not have to put my views folder in the public folder. I'm sure there's a way around it. And I think if I just tinker with that include files thing a little bit more, if I move my views folder back out and change that include file config setting to point to that, it might work. I just haven't tried it yet. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Michael says, but you need your own projects hosted to even get clients. So Michael, that's the whole point of this is that this is all free. That's why I'm showing it to you, because you don't necessarily have to invest if you're smart about the tools that you use, right? Don't get suckered in by that tactic of people telling you that you have to spend money to make money, because you don't. You really don't. I've got my personal website hosted on Netlify for free. I'm hosting this entire application for free, full stack application for free. And the only thing I pay for is the custom domain for my website, and that was my choice. I didn't have to, but I pay like $7 a year for that. So really, you don't get suckered in by the notion that you got to spend money to make money. So use free tools. Don't pay unless you have to. If you do hit the limit on the free tier, then yeah, pay for it. But don't pay for anything until you hit that limit. Oh, thank you so much. Life is meaning. Life's meaning. Sorry, life's meaning 42. Thank you so much for the follow. So I would highly suggest, if you're wondering about specific languages and things that you can use within functions, I would highly suggest checking out the docs to see exactly what's covered. I can't tell you everything that is, but check the docs, see if your particular stack is listed there. Let's see, yeah, here we go. Netlify docs, and then if we go, I'll post it in chat again here. Yeah, exactly. Holly says if you hit the limit without making money, then you probably got a problem. Yeah, you might have either a problem with the way you've built your application or something that you're not monetizing that you probably need to. Decurse says, what do you use for domain name registry? I use Namecheap for mine. You can get names really cheap there, and they give you a lot of choices. So I use Namecheap for mine, and then I'm hosting my site on Netlify. And this site too that I'm building here, the one I've been showing you, this one, this will be hosted on Netlify with a custom domain. I'm not going to tell you what that domain is, but it'll be hosted on Netlify with a custom domain. It's actually hosted there now. That's what's running here. And I'll show you how it does work. We'll do first name Mary. Yeah. And so you can see that the change that we made to X out the last names on folks, that is showing up here. So we're obviously hitting my live database in Supabase in the cloud, the one we just updated. So this is a real full stack app doing real full stack things, hosted fully on Netlify with Netlify functions. TV says, would you have separate functions for dev, pre-prod, and prod? No. You can, because like I said, you can use Netlify CLI to run a locally hosted dev version of your site with all the same functions, because right, that's the point of separate environments, is that you test something in dev and then you deploy it up, either to production or to a QA environment, and you want it to be the same in each environment so that that the thing that you tested in dev is actually, the thing that you signed off on or that the client signed off on in dev is going to be the same thing that they see in prod, right? So same functions, you can just run them locally first. It will work if you have your functions. Netlify, that's why we use the Netlify CLI, because it can run those functions locally, or on a local host, and then deploy them up, run them for real, and bada bing. Rask says I use FlyIO with free tier, holds tight even for production. Yeah, FlyIO is another really good one. Um, and I'm only using Netlify because I'm familiar with it, but I've definitely heard good things about FlyIO as well. Yep, totally. Moshko says, does it protect your apps from API spamming? As far as security features, again, I'm going to refer you to the docs. Check that out and see, as far as what protections you can enable. Um, I'm enabling some protections myself on my application. For example, my database is locked down with row level security policies, so that even if a request gets sent, I have protections in place so that they can try to send a request, but they can try to update data or delete records or insert new records. It's not gonna work because I've got my database locked down with row level security. Michael PC says, what do you use for auth? So the wonderful thing about Supabase is that it has built-in authentication. Built-in authentication is really lovely with Supabase. All you have to do is call a specific method. You just call the login method. And so, well, the first thing that you do is you set up your username in Supabase. You set up your account information, you set up the password. And then after that, all you need to do is call the method from your app, log in, and then Supabase will give you everything you need. It will give you like the token. It'll give you all the, authentication stuff that you need to establish your session, to then send requests back up to Supabase to authenticate that token, and Supabase handles the whole thing. So you don't have to build your JSON web token yourself in your app. Supabase will hold that for you. Yeah. Mr. Cha, thank you so much for the follow. Sorry I missed your follow. Thank you. So I really enjoyed working because I've built authentication myself before, using JWT, using, I'm spacing. What's the tool that we've used before to set up authentication? Uh, the open source one. What is it? Somebody help me out. It's got a bunch of templates for like Google OAuth and stuff. Passport. Yeah. We've used, JWT Passport and Passport, to set up authentication, which you can absolutely do. But it is nice when your backend is just handling that for you, right? And it's logging all the requests so that you can, if you have some questionable activity coming in, you're like, I feel like somebody might be trying to log in from some shady location. Supabase is going to also keep all the logs of those authentication attempts for you. So you can go back and query those anytime, and see who's trying to do what. Do I need to change a password? Do I need to change my policies? Whatever. And then in combination with those, like authentication, you can then set up policies on your data. And I'd disabled this for, I disabled row level security for testing purposes, but you can see I have two policies on here. And one of them is enabling updates for authenticated users only, and then allowing read-only access for everyone. But you can add additional policies to basically make your data as restricted or as limited to specific users as you want. So I hope that makes sense. It really does make it easier to lock down your data. Yeah, so really this is just me. We did that at the very start of the stream before you joined, Holly. I just blitzed out my data. Yeah, and I have a whole fake data set that I've used previously with this, with this. But yeah, this is just what we did at the start of the stream. All this data has pretty much been modified anyway. I am going to blitz the whole thing out, truncate the whole thing, and reload it anyway. I have a whole separate data set that I'm keeping. So yeah. But yeah, Faker.js, if you do need to generate fake data, I would also recommend Faker.js. ChatGPT can also generate data for you, but Faker's probably faster. Yeah. So if you need fake data for your app, for testing purposes, yep, yeah, definitely recommend. Like I say, ChatGPT can also, if you need, data that meets very specific criteria, you can uh, ask ChatGPT for it, but Faker's probably faster. Yeah. Frank said offering more examples there of the types of policies you can add. So if we go back here, um, so you can set basically any type of policy that you want. Um, you can name it whatever you want. Then whatever table you want to apply it to, you can set whether it's permissive or restricted. And basically any type of CRUD operation that you want to configure it for, and then you can add some custom SQL. If you know SQL, you can add some custom SQL. They also give you templates for the types of policies that you can enact. So um, select, insert, update, delete, they give you a lot of great jumping off points for setting your policies. They really want you to use row level security. And yes, and I would recommend it as well, given that, like I say, I only turned it off because I was testing something very specific and I forgot to turn it back on. But I will definitely be turning it back on for the production deployment of this application. Yep, privileges of certain groups and individuals. Yeah. So in this case, only one user for this application has the privilege to um, update, actually update data. Oh, and one last thing before we actually get into the code, one last thing I wanted to mention is that speaking of privileges and things, um, as we talked about before, when you deploy something to Netlify with your functions, you're limited to a very small set of folders that it's actually going to recognize. And you may have noticed earlier, if you had an eagle eye, you might have noticed that if we go back to my deploys here, you might have noticed that one of the things that it did not capture was my .env file. And I'm not going to show you this, but when you deploy your site, if you have environment variables, you should be including those variables with your deployment and putting them directly into Netlify. Because, obviously it's not going to pull those from your .env. You should put them into Netlify when you do your deploy. So that way Netlify can read them. I'm going to take a quick hydrate here. So just as a reminder, it will ask you for that when you deploy. So just go ahead and put those in there. Okay. Yeah, if you're deploying directly from the command line, yeah, it's likely that you will, it will detect that or ask for it or whatever. In my case, I was deploying from GitHub. And so, obviously I have my environment variables in my git ignore. So those were never in GitHub anyway. And so during the deployment, it asked me for those specifically. Michael BC says, well, that's a massive, what's a massive risk? I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking. That's a good point, frankly. They say nowadays a user should store its creation date to be able to enforce GDP. That's the data protections, European data protections, right? Just want to make sure I know the acronym. Um, Unfortunately, in America, we don't have any protections. We're just all, we're all out here being rugged individualists, pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. But some arguably smarter countries have enabled certain user data protections that are actually enforced. Michael BC says, given Netlify my env file, well, I mean, your environment variables have got to go somewhere, right? Yeah. It's up to you whether you want to take that risk. Frankly says corporations didn't allow GDP, I guess. It's lobbying is a major problem here in the United States, wherein corporations directly influence lawmakers and the decisions that they make. And so they tend to obviously then favor corporations. So I'm sure that had something to do with it. But whatever the reason, we don't have the same data protections here in the United States that many of the European countries have. So if you are deploying an application that is going to be used internationally, then yeah, I think that's probably something you will have to consider. You'd obviously have to do your own research on that. Maybe you work with a lawyer to make sure you're getting it right. But yeah, there may be additional considerations if your app is going to be used widely in European countries. Yeah. Obviously, if you live in Europe, then yeah, totally. All right, I think that's all the kind of preliminary stuff I wanted to talk about prior to actually looking at how do we turn what was formerly a server controller into a Netlify function. We've kind of got the groundwork in place. So let's kind of do a side by side here. I'm going to show you some of the differences. Some of them we've already touched on, but hopefully having some concrete examples to look at will make it a little bit easier to kind of get your head around the differences here. And you can look at the finished code for this app on my GitHub. You can do exclamation. Actually, my bot just posted it in chat there. Perfect timing. Thanks, bot. You can check out the finished repo there. You can check out the finished repo on GitHub. And the original repo, I think, is just the one prior to it, the one that's your traditional Node and Express setup. Michael PC says, can the env file be encrypted so only me and it can read it? Maybe. I mean, we can encrypt passwords and things like that as long as you're I would say that as long as you've encoded, so if you're encrypting the file, as long as your functions have the appropriate decryption decryption function, I guess, set up, right? Just like we would for passwords. Then I suppose you could. Yeah. I mean, I'm just spitballing here. If anybody's done that, feel free to share your experience. But I would think that as long as you have, if you're encrypting your file, as long as your Netlify functions have the ability to decrypt it in order to access those environment variables, then sure. Okay, so first off, we're going to look at a really simple one. So on the right here is my traditional server.js. And I'm going to kind of adjust this window a little bit. On the left is my traditional server.js where we're requiring all of our different modules, we're requiring Supabase, and then we're setting up our middleware. And this is kind of what we've already done in our netlify.toml file right here. So it's kind of emulating how we would set up middleware to handle these requests. But our first route here is just the get from our. Oh, thank you so much for the follow, Pedro. Welcome to the stream. Good to have you here. Yeah, and that's a great point, Rask. You could also use a vault, like an external vault. Uh-huh. Good. Yes, good. Thank you for pointing that out. So we would have a route, right? And that route is essentially for when the user visits the base URL. So whatever your yeah, of course, Pedro. Yeah, 100 devs represent. We got a lot of 100 devs folks here in the chat today. So essentially when you visit the base domain, it's going to automatically render our index.html, right? So how do we emulate that within a Netlify function? So let's take a look at that. I have a function for this, and it's called render index. So I'm going to move this over. I'm going to kind of be juggling things back and forth here a little bit. You can see that there's a little bit more involved here in a Netlify function versus just a straight up, res.render index. There's a little bit more going on, but we're going to talk through it to explain exactly what's happening here. So just like kind of in a React component, we have to require the specific node modules that are going to be used here. Since we're going to be using EJS, we have to require EJS, and we're going to be using path because, again, these functions don't natively know where things are. You have to tell them, and so we need to use path to kind of grab that information. And as Holly pointed out earlier, I believe, also similar to React components, is we have to export this function. We have to export this function so it can be called. And you'll also notice that it's asynchronous as well. So we're exporting this function and we're calling it asynchronously. And you'll see why we're calling it asynchronously in just a minute. Two things are being passed in, event and context. We'll talk more about what those are later because we aren't actually using them for this particular, for just rendering the homepage. We don't need either of these. So we'll talk about that in another function. So then we're going to have a try catch block. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to go find our actual index.ejs page. And then, this is a little bit different. We're going to take the contents of that page, we're going to render it out, and then we're going to save it as HTML. So essentially what gets saved in this variable is the HTML that we're going to be sending to the browser. Because if you remember, EJS is not HTML, right? It's essentially JavaScript that's put on a mustache and sunglasses to look like HTML, right? And so we're rendering this out as HTML, we're storing it in this variable, and then we're returning that result. So the body of our return here is going to be our raw HTML. Then we have to apply our headers, and we have to send back our status code. So it's like we're prepping everything inside of our function. That function is going to execute. It's going to render everything out, and then it's going to send the result back to the browser, which is going to read it as HTML because it is. And then obviously we have some error handling here. So let's look at the similarities here between how we would do this in our server.js versus how we're doing it now. So one of the things that's different, obviously, is that in our server.js, all of these routes and controllers are kind of working together, right? Our server is aware of kind of where everything is. It knows the file structure already. We've already set our, location for views, and we've set our view engine sort of globally. So we set that once, and then our server knows exactly where to get that information, which is a little bit different than our functions, because remember, for our functions, they're all independent. So we have to set that individually each time. So it's an extra step there inside of our function. So rather than being able to kind of set it globally and access that from any of our controllers, we have to set it individually in each of our functions that's going to be accessing these EJS files. Hey, Fafin, good to see ya. And then another thing, though, that is actually similar to how our server works is this res.render, right? So what's actually happening here is we are essentially rendering out the EJS as HTML and then passing it to the browser. So very similar to what's happening here, just maybe not quite as verbose. Yes, Rask. And so I believe that is what I was mentioning earlier about that include files setting that you can set in your netlify.toml. So yeah, if you want to include separate files outside of the public folder, absolutely check that article out. And that's actually what I'm going to be trying next. I just didn't bother to try it yet. But yeah, in your netlify.toml, you can choose to include files in other locations. So essentially what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be updating this to move. So I'm going to move my views folder out of the public folder, and then I'm going to route to, I'm just going to route to it directly, right? With this included files sort of variable here in my netlify.toml. But yes, that's exactly right, Rask. I just haven't done it yet. Haven't needed to. But yeah, thank you for sharing the article. Yes, and that's a great point. You can include files by functions. So if you only want files to be available for an individual function, right? If you only want to share a file with one specific function, you can do that. You don't have to share it globally. It's kind of like passing props, right? In React, it's kind of like passing props. You can pass props to one specific component, or you can pass them potentially to all components if you need to. And so you can scope it based on what your function actually needs in order to work. Yep, totally. All right, so let's go back to our render index here. So essentially, we'll just walk through it real quick. So essentially what we're doing here is, like I said, we're grabbing the path to our file, we're rendering it out as HTML and saving it in a variable, and then we're returning that to the browser, giving the browser the appropriate context, what content type it is, assigning the headers, passing the body, passing a success status. And then when we do that, it's going to be able to render out that file. Evo says, looks like middleware chaining a little bit. Yeah, right. So on the right here, we actually are setting, this is like a traditional server. We are setting multiple pieces of middleware. Like, and it's kind of similar, except we have to do it individually by function rather than like once in, globally in our server file. So, but yeah, it's a similar concept. We still have to set all these things in a traditional server. We have to tell it where our views are located. We have to tell it what view engine we're using, um, setting up session information, that kind of thing. It's just a different way of going about it here in functions. Hey, Grizz, good to see you. Welcome to the stream, by the way, Evil Socket. So this is kind of our first example of a function. If, like I say, if you're familiar with React, this might look a little bit familiar to you in the way in kind of the basic way it's constructed and how it behaves. It's a little self-contained unit. We have to give it the modules it needs in order to function. We have to export it. Thank you for this subscription. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Evil Socket. And you subscribe with Prime too, so that means it doesn't cost you anything. And it costs Jeff Bezos money, which is exactly what we want to happen. Jeff Bezos should have to take a pickaxe to his giant, I don't know, his giant diamond that he keeps in his basement and chip off a tiny fraction of that in order to pay for all the Prime subs that people are using. Exactly. We got to take Jeff. I don't care. I'm not asking, like, I never want it to seem like I'm asking for Jeff Bezos's money. I just want it to not be with Jeff Bezos. I don't care where it goes. It just shouldn't be with Jeff Bezos. Send it somewhere else. Give it to your favorite small streamer. Like, just get it out of Jeff Bezos's hands. That's all I care about. He should have to, yeah, he should have to sell a micro fraction of his gold Lamborghini in order for to pay for all these Prime subs. Ugh, anyway. Right? Yeah, his ex became a philanthropist, so, the Bezos effect. Exactly. Yeah, but anyway, so this is an example of how we can render this page. And given the fact that that I'm using views here, that I'm using kind of a non-standard page type rather than just like a static file, this is a little bit more involved than rendering out just a static file. But it is still possible to render out templates, EJS, handlebars, whatever you need to render, you can absolutely do with functions. Emperor says, I basically have to work on the back end for the tech team project. Never worked with Node, Express, MongoDB, and React Native before, but I will give it a shot. Oh, yeah, that sounds like an interesting challenge, but I'm sure you can do it. It's so nice as you learn more about these systems, and you learn more platforms and tools, you start to see the patterns of behavior between them, right? At first, it seems like just completely impassable, but then you start to see, oh, yeah, I've done the same thing 3 times here. This seems to be a standard practice, it's a standard pattern, standard template, or, oh, hey, this thing behaves really similarly to something I already know, right? And then that makes it a little bit more comfortable. And then you can look up the nuances in the documentation, but you start to see the overall patterns and trends for how these things work. Emo, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome to the stream. Hello from Egypt, indeed. Yeah, hello from the US. Evil Socket says, folks still using Mongo? Yeah, absolutely. I'm a senior SQL developer by day, so I work solely in I actually get paid to do work that is nothing like what we're doing right now. I get paid to do work with SQL. Oh my goodness, Cascady. Thank you so much for the sub. Wow, and you subscribe with Prime too. We got Jeff Bezos in there with a little bitty pickaxe chipping away at his giant diamond in his garage just to pay for these subs. Thanks, folks. That's so lovely of you. But so getting back to what I was saying, I'm paid to use SQL and to work in a fully relational database environment, but I still use Mongo for projects. I still use we've done a bunch of projects here on stream using MongoDB as a backend. Now, am I more familiar with SQL? Yes, but I think that MongoDB wouldn't exist unless there was a reason for it to exist. That's capitalism, baby. It's not going to exist unless it's making the creators money, or the people that built it money. And so every database type has its use cases, and there are times when document-based databases are better for a specific application than a relational database. Our relational databases, oh my goodness, That was really loud. Faffin Boots says 111 bits. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Thank you, Faffin. And thank you again for this subscriptions, everyone. Cascade. I think I said your name wrong earlier. Cascade Z. Thank you so much. Um, but yeah, so these things all have a reason to exist, and there are times when document based databases are legitimately better than relational databases. If your data is very changeable, if your data has non-standard structures, if it's very hard to set down like strict rules for your data, then yeah, object-based storage, non-relational object-based storage is way better than relational databases. And I'll give you an example. So we've actually encountered some issues. So at work, remember, I work with relational databases, which have a very type strict, right? Very strict typing, very strict rules. Each record written to a table has to abide by the rules of the table. And we actually were having some issues for a while where we were ingesting some data that was just so gnarly. It was just there were zero controls on the source system, but we were still being expected to ingest that data to take it in, but we couldn't clean up the data until we'd already ingested it. And so if we were able to put that into document based storage and then maybe run it through some cleanups and then put it into a structured environment, then that would have been much easier to deal with. But instead we had to deal with constant database errors when it was trying to write this nasty data. And we're just like, well, guess we got to put in we had to put in a bunch of middleman processes to fix it when it would have been much easier for us to just write that data to a non-relational target and then do our cleanup, within the target as a whole versus having to clean up each individual transaction as it came in. So there's definitely times when all types of databases are going to be useful for your projects. And I say this a lot, but am I going to like ham it up a little bit sometimes about how much I love SQL? Well, yeah, of course, I'm a SQL dev. But I think it's important to never discount a system, and to be open to the potential applications that that system or tool could have for your project, and to know the use cases for it, the valid use cases for those different systems and tools, because you never know when they're going to come in handy. Send the bill to Jeff. Absolutely, Michael. Rask says, I've been thinking quite a lot on how to easily explain serverless to 100 devs because a lot of folks learned MERN MVC and try to deploy directly on serverless hosting. Rask says, have you touched on the DB connection part? We kind of already did it. So really, at least in the way that I'm using these functions, the database connection part is identical really to how we were doing it with server functions. The only difference being that we have to set up independent connections, individual connections for each function that needs it. So, I mean, it's not terribly different. Well, we haven't really touched on that yet. We've only gone over one function so far, and this one is just a read. This is just a read only. It's not pulling any. It's not actually. It's just serving a page. It's not pulling from the database at all. So, but we are the next function we're going to talk about does involve hitting the database, searching it, and pulling back X number of records. Holly says, I mean, the guy is smart talking about Jeff Bezos. That kind of money is not just luck. Absolutely. Yeah. I am never denying that Jeff Bezos is a very smart person. So many, you know, millionaires in tech are extremely intelligent people. But I do think that the majority of human wealth should not be concentrated in like the top 1% of the population. You're allowed to be smart and you're allowed to be rich. Absolutely. That is something that everyone is allowed to be, but the tremendous imbalance of power that that kind of wealth brings, I think, is a real problem, and wealth should be more evenly distributed amongst the population so that the people who are very smart but who are not rich and who never have the opportunity to become rich can still be successful. That's all I'm saying. But hey, maybe that's just me. Ras says, I got 2 pairs of MongoDB socks at the React Summit 2 days ago. Oh man. Okay, we're about to take a break here in a minute. I'm gonna show you guys something when we come back. I was at a conference a couple months ago, yeah, and I got some equally nerdy socks. I'll bring them. I'll show them to the camera when we come back. Oh, thank you, Fafin. That's so lovely of you. Michael PC says, "Will SQL ever die?" Hell no. SQL's been around since the 70s and it is never, ever, ever going away. SQL is a wonderful language. I love it so much. Um, I was born, let's see, like 20, like almost 20 years after SQL was invented, and I love it so much. It's elegant, it's simple, it's powerful, it does only what it was meant to do, and that's a lovely thing. Michael PC says, "How should someone earn the wealth?" Well, hey, that's what uh, that's what we're trying to do here with 100 Devs, right? We're trying to give you the tools to do that. Not saying there's no guarantees that anyone's going to make money doing anything, right? But the best we can do is give you knowledge for free, open doors, teach you how to network, teach you how to make connections, give you the awareness of free tools that means you don't have to outlay more money. You don't have to spend money to make money, like we were talking about earlier. You shouldn't have to spend money to make money if you have the skills. And so all we can do is facilitate, right? And SQL is very successful, yeah. TV says double the shares created one day before your IPO and award half of them to yourself, which you immediately sell. Yeah. Oh man, IPOs make me so angry. They do. I know the Zuck did it. Yep. Absolutely. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a break. Like I say, we're gonna take 5 minutes. I'm gonna grab my funky socks. I'll show them to you when we get back. And then we're gonna go over. So this first function that we went over, like I said, all it's doing is serving up a page, right? It's really not doing anything other than the most basic of operations. But what I want to show you next is how we can make a function talk to the database. Well, actually, talk to the client, get a request from the client, process that information, send that request to the database, get the response, and then send that response back to the client. How do we do that? That's the meat and potatoes of a full stack application, right? So when we come back, we're going to go over that type of a function and see how we manage that with Netlify. All right. See you back here in 5. Hydrate, get up and stretch. If you've been sitting here this whole time, get up and stretch. Or if you're not able to get up, then, move your arms, move your legs. Don't get carpal tunnel. All right. See you back here in 5. All right, folks, we got about a minute left in the break, so come on back whenever you're ready. Make sure that you're hydrating, make sure that you're stretching, um, make sure that you're doing what you got to do to stay healthy. And also, as always, pet your dogs, pet your cats, pet your significant other with their permission, of course, and then come on back. Yes, and I have the socks. You will see the socks in about 30 seconds. All right, and we're back. Hope you all enjoyed the break. And as promised, yes, I have my nerdy socks. What was the? So somebody mentioned that they had MongoDB socks from a conference, and I said, yeah, I went to a conference a couple months ago, and this is probably the nerdiest item of clothing that I own, and maybe not nerdiest, maybe geekiest is the right word. Um, I have a lot of nerdy stuff. Obviously, I have Star Trek T-shirts, and I have full on like cosplay. Like I have a Starfleet uniform in my closet right now. But as far as like pure, I don't know, nerdiness, these are. Let's see if I can focus on them. These are Informatica socks, and if you don't know what Informatica is, you can Google it. But essentially, it is a large scale data warehouse ETL tool. So a lot of the work that I do is ETL work. I build ETL data pipelines. ETL stands for extract, transform, load, which is where you extract data from a source, you transform that data, and then you write that data to a target. And that's a lot of what I do for work. And so I was at this conference, and the company that hosts our ETL software was giving away socks, and so I got some Informatica socks. And yes, I do wear them. They're surprisingly comfortable. They're fairly cushiony. They're breathable. Uh, Baffin says, "Is the Starfleet suit a onesie? Does it have a foot strap or socks?" Yeah, it's if you're wondering if you are a Star Trek nerd like I am, and you know the difference between the uniforms for the various series, it is a Deep Space Nine and Voyager era uniform. It's a Deep Space Nine Voyager era uniform. So it's the one piece with the like yellow shoulder cap thing, yellow shoulder cap style one piece. Yeah, it does have foot straps, what do they call them? Stirrup pants, that go under your foot to hold your pants down, keep them from riding up. Yeah, and it's got the it's not the swoosh kind. It's not like the next generation swoosh style uniform. It's just a straight horizontal shoulder, yellow shoulder thing. You can Google Star Trek Voyager uniforms and you'll see what I mean. Um, and so yeah, and I've got like the communicator button and the collar thing, the pips that go on your collar for rank. Yep. Yeah, well, I think they're called stirrup pants. I think because they're like a stirrup on a saddle, goes under your foot. Yeah. But yeah, I have one of those in my closet. Yeah, I've got like several other cosplays. I've got a full Spider-Man outfit. I've got all sorts of stuff. I go to cons regularly. It's a lot of fun. Bootstraps are the thing that's on the back of your boot that helps you pull them up, like pull them onto your foot. These are actually something that's on the bottom of the pants. Yeah. Well, bootstraps are like they're the thing that's where the phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps" come from. It's literally a loop on the back of the boot that you hook your finger through and you pulls the boot onto your foot. So the concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is you reaching down, pulling on your own bootstrap so it lifts up your foot and is supposed to like lift you higher, which by definition is impossible. But you're never gonna be able to lift your own body by your bootstraps. So the whole phrase is a bit of a misnomer, but it is in real life too. So I guess it makes sense. Pull yourself up by your pants straps. That sounds painful. Yeah. Yeah, like Holly says, informatica means computer science in Italian. Yeah, maybe that's the origin of the program name. I don't know. Um, Same in Portuguese, Spanish, and French. Okay, yeah, informatique. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, we use Informatica at work, so I got some Informatica socks. Yeah, I have an Informatica coaster somewhere too, I think. Conferences have the weirdest merch. Visha says, I pull myself up by Material UI. That's great. I love that. All right, so prior to the break, we looked at a very simple Lambda function here. All it's really doing is it's just rendering out my view. It's just finding it in the location where it lives, and it is just literally rendering it as HTML and then sending it to the browser with the appropriate headers. That's all it's doing. Um, yeah, exactly, Faf, and that's the point. Is yeah, it's not possible to do that, in by the terms of the expression itself, right? Pull yourself up by your wedgie. Yeah. All right, so now let's look at one that's a little bit more complicated. I want to look at the function that occurs so in our application here, um, when we actually do a search, the function that handles that search operation. Yes. So Rask is asking about the export. Yeah. So that's what we're doing here. Exports.handler. It's kind of like how we would export a React component, right? We would do pretty much the same thing, just slightly different syntax. But yeah, you'd set up your export. You can either do that, with React. We sometimes do it at the end, or sometimes we'll wrap the whole thing in an export and do it that way. But yeah, it's very similar because the function's going to need to be called, and so we're exporting it. But yeah, so when we actually do a search, we're going to have to not only listen for a request from the client, but we're then going to have to talk to the database and send the result then as a response back down to the client. So a slightly more complicated function here. This is my search.js. So, but you'll see it follows a similar pattern. Move this over. And actually, no, let's look at the original first, what the original was doing, and then we'll compare it against the Netlify version. So so search, yeah. So on the right here is my original server.js version of the function. And again, this is going to be an asynchronous function here as well, listening for this search route. And we are taking the form data essentially and destructuring it. We're taking, grabbing the form data, the request.query, and we're destructuring it into these 4 variables. We're setting up our query, and we're setting up some optional filters on our query depending on what parts of the form the user filled out. This is going to be very similar in both functions, so I'm going pretty quickly through it. There's really no differences here. And then we execute our query, and then we render out our index.ejs, and we pass in whatever the result was of that query. So we already have our EJS set up to just be waiting for that object, that records object, and it's set up to already loop through those records and render them out in that table format that we saw. And so essentially all that's doing is it's sending the query out to Supabase, it's awaiting the result, and it is then rendering our index.ejs with the records object, and then it's just catching any errors. So we're going to see something very similar here in our Lambda function. So once again, these functions are all self-contained. So we're going to have to require the specific modules that we need. For this one, we do need Supabase. So we're going to pull that in. We're also going to require EJS, and we are going to also require path. Now, when I'm saying that I'm requiring Supabase and EJS, you're still going to need your package.json to tell Netlify what packages are going to be needed here. So I still do have EJS and Supabase listed in my package.json, even though I'm not, running Node locally. I still do need those packages installed to tell Netlify exactly what's needed in order to make this function work. So the first thing I do is connect to Supabase. I pass in my URL and my API key. Now, I'm referencing process.env here. Even though my environment variables are stored within Netlify itself now, rather than in my .env file, like that, remember that env file, you might see it in the list over here, but it's in the git ignore. So If I'm deploying from GitHub, Netlify has no knowledge of that env file. If I'm running my application locally in Netlify Dev, then it will be able to access it. But I've already put my environment variables directly into Netlify, and I can still access them exactly the same way that I would in just Garden Variety Express. So I'm setting up my connection here. Excuse me, setting up my connection here, and then I'm setting up my function. And this time I'm actually going to be making use of this event parameter here. Remember, we saw this last time. We weren't using it in the other function at all, but this time we are actually going to be using it. Now, from what we know of events, remember what this function is doing, right? This is waiting for something to happen on the client side, and then it's sending that request to the database, and then sending the request back down to the client, or the response. So why, from what we know of events, why might I be making use of this event parameter for this particular function? What do you think it might be for? Or what do you think it might be capturing? Based on what we know about what events are and how we've used them in the past. Any guesses? So I'll give you some more context here. So based on what we know about events, right? Events are going to capture information about some kind of a user interaction, right? So, a user clicks a button, or a user hovers over a particular image, right? And so a ton of data gets captured in that event. A ton of data gets captured in that event. The type of interaction, where the user, like physically where the user is located on the earth, where their IP address is connecting from, what machine they're on. If you've ever console logged an event, it's really quite illuminating how much data gets captured whenever you are interacting with any single application in any way. Um, and so when we're calling this function, we can look inside this event data to see exactly what happened when they submitted that search form. So instead of our traditional sort of request response, instead of our traditional sort of request response that we're used to, we're instead capturing the event data and then looking inside that event to see, okay, when this function was called from our client side, what was actually submitted. So it's kind of similar to how we would use request. We just go in there, we destructure that event data to capture these 4 values, and we look inside the query string parameters property in order to retrieve these values. Dcurse says, is the ORM built in Supabase built into, oh, you're talking about the how we built this query here? These are all Supabase methods. So if you recall, we required Supabase up here. We required specifically the Supabase JS library. Oh, Johnny, thank you so much for the follow. Good to have you here. So we specifically, Supabase has a JavaScript library. It has libraries for multiple languages, but we're using the JavaScript library here so that we can configure our query using that library directly, and then send it off to Supabase to be executed. So we're declaring this as a const. So we're setting each of these values. We're essentially hard coding each of these values from the query data. And actually what I'm going to do for you right now to try to make this a little bit easier to see what we're doing here and what data we're actually capturing in this event, I'm just going to add a console log here. I'm going to console log the event. I had this before. I wish I hadn't taken it out. Do that. And then See, I'm just gonna, no, I'll go ahead and deploy it. It's fine. I was debating whether, well, no, actually, I'm gonna run it in Netlify Dev to show you what that looks like. I'm gonna run this in Netlify Dev. So I'm just gonna do, I've already installed Netlify, and I've already installed Netlify globally, so I can just do Netlify Dev. And as a reminder, what this is essentially doing is it's allowing you to test your Netlify deployments locally before you actually deploy them to Netlify itself. So it's going to give you a Netlify-like environment in your local host, so that you can make sure everything's working, like your functions and everything, prior to actually deploying to Netlify. So, and intelligence says, are these deconstructed values now mutable? Well, we're declaring them as constants. So I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but we're declaring them as constants. So we are destructuring them, assigning them to those four individual variables, and then they're constants. So they're set. All right, so this is the local version. We can see we're in localhost.888. And if I just do a search here, we'll do another search for Mary, what we did before. And what we should see is that event get logged to the console, to the local console, not to the function console, because remember, we're running locally here. So we can see we get actually a lot of useful information here. We can see that we got a status 200 response, how long it took to respond, exactly what path we hit. And then this is my event here. All of this, just from that one interaction, it's capturing all this data. So we're getting, everything about the query. We're getting the type, exactly what path we were trying to hit. The query is structured in a different way. If we had multiple values in each property, we could get that. All the headers, exactly what the referring site was, the browser that was used. We get all this information, most of which you're probably never going to use. But even like I said, the type of browser, I'm using Chrome. And also even the raw URL data that it's actually sending in the URL path. So that's how we're retrieving the information that's actually being submitted to the form. Whoops, too far. Sorry. We are going into this right here to get a lovely, fully properly structured object that contains all the data that we need. Okay, so that's how we're getting that. We're grabbing that, we're storing it in these four variables. And you can see that the how I'm able to destructure this is that the same variable names that I've listed here match exactly what is shown in this object, right? So the reason I don't have to say last name equals last name, first name equals first name, birth year equals birth year, death year equals death year, is that since my variable names are exactly the same as the names in the object, I can use this little bit of shorthand to just list the variables and they will automatically be assigned correctly. If I was trying to put these values into variables that had a different name, then yes, I would have to say, last name equals surname and first name equals F name and birth year equals B or whatever. If they had different names, I would have to manually assign them, but because they have the identical name, I can just destructure them in this way. I hope that helps a little bit. And so then we build out our query just like we did with the original version. There's literally no difference here. I can use all the same Supabase methods. I just copied and paste. The query is structured in identically the same way. And we even execute it in exactly the same way as well. Yes, Holly, you can destructure and have your own name. That's kind of what I was saying as far as like we could do something like if I wanted to call this L name instead of last name, I could say L name, but I would have to say L name equals, last name, right? I'd have to do that manually. Not sure if that's what you were getting at. Let me know if I misunderstood what you were saying there. So yeah, and we're going to execute it in literally the same way too. There's no differences there. We can just do another try catch. Yeah, like you yes, like that. Yeah, we would have to, like I was saying, we have to manually assign each of those values instead of just being able to do the shorthand where we can just list the variables, which is nice. But sometimes you do want different names, definitely. And so in order to do that, you would have to do that manual assignment. Yep. Um, so we run the query against the database, and then really the only difference here is how we eventually render the result. So building the query is exactly the same. Um, Executing the query is exactly the same as before. And then the only difference really is how we then render the result. We just have to, again, tell it where to find the file, um, render it out as HTML, and then return it to the browser as HTML. So looking at this function, the only real difference here from the original controller is the fact that we had to set up our connection again, and then the fact that we had to capture this form data out of the event, and then a couple more steps to render the file, and everything else was the same. So not terribly difficult to convert that from the original controller. The logs, so it depends on what you're asking there, TV Josh. They ask where does it save your logs? So if we're running it locally, like we are right now, and I do a console log, um, it's going to log it to the console just like we would expect from like a server JS, right? Or any other kind of local host. But if I'm looking for the logs for the actual deployment, I would need to go into Netlify and into logs. So we go there and we can look at functions, and we can see if I go to my search function, it should have some logs there. Actually, actually what I'll do is I'll just do another search here. This is my actual deployment. Do that. Search. There we go. And if I go back to the logs, yeah. So we'll see that it just ran the function. Does it require JSON formatted logs or anything? No, it just, I mean, I didn't have to set up anything here to do logging. Um, I could add additional, logging here just by putting console logs in my functions. You don't have to do anything special. On the actual deployment, if I, like in my function, in my search function, if I were to deploy this right now with that console log in place, I would see the whole event get logged into that Netlify function log. Um, you're asking about filtering the logs? I mean, you can filter in various ways. You can set a custom date range. You can filter by the specific. If you know the specific request ID, you can filter that. You can search it in various ways here. I don't know if you can limit what actually gets added to the log. I don't know the answer to that. But you can You can definitely search by specific requests here if you know what they are. Or log level. Like if it's an error, you could search for just error, so you don't have to see all this stuff. That was really helpful for me yesterday when I was trying to debug the crap out of this thing, getting errors all the time. I wonder if I want to see if I can show you what an error looks like. I've got plenty of those. Let's see. I think I was having trouble with this function here. I'm going to do, we'll do last day. And yeah, here we go. Yeah. So, here's an example of what an error looks like in these logs. I had a field that I had configured as a number, and I was trying to pass in an empty string, and Supabase didn't like that, and so it was sending this error back, and so it got logged in my function logs here. Yeah, thanks for folks who are familiar with the service that Josh was referencing there. Thanks for sharing your knowledge of that, because yeah, I'm not familiar with CloudWatch. I'm really not familiar with AWS at all. Uh, don't have any use for that in my day job. So but yeah, so you can see that couple different types of errors here. They had an error on my login page. I had an error, coming from Supabase, and all that gets tracked here. So yeah, we can filter by time, time span. You can set a custom time span if you want. So yeah, you have a fair amount of filtering, and you can copy to clipboard. It's not quite as good as like a CSV export, but you can still copy it to clipboard at least. Yeah, console log does not track date time. You're correct. So if you wanted to build your own custom, uh, outputs with timestamps on them, yes, you'd have to use something in addition to that. Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, these logs have been perfectly sufficient for me. The only extra thing that I really did was the occasional console log to like capture a specific ID value, if I needed to figure out what was going on with something. But I mean, these logs have been verbose enough that I was able to figure out what was going on most of the time. Yeah. Okay, so back to the function. I hope this kind of demystifies this a little bit for you, in that there's really very little difference between the original server controller and the actual function that is running right now in this Netlify deployment, this serverless function. Again, the only differences are really related to how these functions actually work, and that they're kind of self-contained units. So we had to set up all these connections, and then in the end, we had to then kind of manually remind it where this stuff was and send back the page details to the browser. But that's really the only difference. The logic itself is pretty much identical. Okay. Um, and there's basically there's templates out there for how to render pages, and Supabase has some docs on setting up connections. Netlify has docs on setting up connections to Supabase, and then Supabase has docs on setting up connections as well. So you can literally copy and paste this stuff from the docs to modify your controllers. There's something else I was going to mention here. Oh yeah, the other thing is, how do we actually call this function? Right, we're exporting it here, but how do we actually call it? And so I'm going to show you how that actually works. So I'm going to go to my view here, my index.ejs, where we're actually calling this. And in the original version, we had a form, right? And that form would call a route, and that route would correspond to a route we had on our server. And, we would just, the server was listening for that, right? And as soon as it hears something for that particular route, it passes that request to the correct controller. The controller does the logic, and then it sends the response back down to the client. It's a similar operation here. Here you can see that I'm actually explicitly calling the function directly. So instead of passing this information through a route, I'm essentially calling the function directly. Now, I don't have to. I'm going to show you how you don't have to do that, but this is the most direct way. I can simply call the function directly, just using a regular form, using a regular get method. Everything else here is the same. I'm just changing the path to be the specific function that I want to invoke. And when I do that, that function is going to fire. It's going to do all the things we talked about, and it's going to return the expected result. And that expected result is index.ejs, but with all the record data that we got back from the database. Okay? Now, what if I want to keep my form exactly the same? I don't want to modify this at all. I just want to have it go to the route it was originally going to go to, which was this, exactly as it would have done in the server. Because maybe I don't have the ability to edit the client side for whatever reason. I need to keep my client side files exactly the same. I can't change the routes at all, but I still need that traffic to end up at the appropriate Netlify function. So how do I do that? Well, that's pretty easy, actually. We're going to head back here to our netlify.toml file. Remember, earlier we set up a couple of things. We told it where to find our public files, where to find our functions, what extra files to include, which was our views. We can also tell it how to handle redirects as well. So here we can see that I have one already. And what do we think this is doing? Why do you think I added this to the file? What do we think it's doing and what it might be for? Any guesses here? We're going from slash to Netlify functions render index. You don't have to worry about the status. What do we think this might be for? Also, guesses are fine. I'm not expecting the right answer every time. If you're worried about that. Also, saying I don't know is fine too. That's a valid answer too. So yeah, essentially what it's doing is a redirect. Hey, Natsusama, good to see you. Yeah. Well, essentially what we can do with this redirects header here is we can send traffic from whatever route we want to whatever destination we want. So these are essentially acting kind of like a router. So just like in some of our larger full stack applications, just like in some of our larger full stack applications, you would have a separate router file, right? You'd have a specific router file, which all it really did was send traffic from the client to the right controller, right? Generally, we wouldn't, in smaller applications, we tend to combine the router. We do app.get, and then we have our controller inside the body of that route. But in larger apps, routers are often in a completely separate file, and that's all we're doing here. These are just our routes. So if my form sends traffic from slash, and I realize this probably shouldn't be slash star. It didn't hurt anything because I'm calling the functions directly on all my other forms, but this should actually probably be slash. We can try that in dev. So essentially, but the reason why I have this is because what route is the user going to when they first load the domain? So when they open up the website for the first time, what route is the user going to? When I open a web page, google.com, what route am I sending to the server? Root? What does that look like in terms of the actual URL? Home? Root? Yeah, I mean, conceptually, you're correct. Mm. So, all right, let's do this. Let's do. Yeah, we'll go to just like google.com. Yeah. And so essentially what you're sending by default when you access Google is you're excluding the base URL. That doesn't get sent along with the route. And so the only thing you're sending is an implicit slash in that route. Okay? So in order for me to display my index.html, my homepage, when they visit the just the base URL, whatever it's going to be, they haven't purchased their domain yet, but whatever that base domain is, I want this slash, this home route, to automatically redirect to this render index function so that it will render my homepage. Okay? Yes, and Holly, that's a great point. So you notice that when I went to google.com, there was no slash at the end, but the slash is implied. Yeah, the slash is it will automatically have the slash set by the browser. So whenever you visit the homepage for any website, it's actually that base URL whatever.com, and then a slash at the end. And you used to be able to see that in Google, I think, in Chrome, but I think Google Chrome hides a lot of that stuff now by default. But yeah, your base URL is always going to be that and then a slash, and the slash is what gets sent as the actual route up to your server. So we need to have this redirect in place so that when they visit the home page, it's going to go to our render index function and render out our index.ejs. Yes, and yeah, you can see the specific request that's being made in the network tab. Yeah. So if you want to investigate that, you can go to the inspect tool in Chrome and click on the network tab to see those routes. And you'll always see it's going to be slash something, slash search, slash, whatever. But the home page is always just slash. It's the root. So yeah, you all were exactly right when you said home, root. Yep, all those things are correct. But programmatically, it looks like this. And so when they visit the home page, I want to call this function. We're going to render the index.ejs, and then that's what the user is going to see. Now, if I want to then update my form to just call the original route, so just slash search, which is what we have in my in my server.js for doing the search. See, the original route was slash search. If I want to keep that the same, I can just add another section here to my redirects. Oops. And, say from search, go to the search function. Like that. So I can add as many of these as I need to in order to route the traffic exactly where it should go. And that way I can customize the routes that I actually show on the client side. So that's another kind of a useful thing that you can do to simplify your client side, or either that or keep things private on the client side, right? Because you aren't always going to want to display the exact route that you're sending or the exact path where things are located. So if you want to kind of obfuscate that a little bit, you can add redirects to say, all right, I'm sending traffic here, but it's actually going to get routed here. Durant says they've been working with Java and Spring for 2 years. They want to got an opportunity to work with Express, and they gave me the opportunity to learn. I don't know if I should change stack or continue my training with Java. I mean, I can't tell you how to live your life. I don't know, what your opportunities are. Opportunities are very different depending on where you're located in the world, and what's local to your community. What I would do, Durank, is what I would do is see what stacks are in demand in your area, depending on where you live. Now, you said you have an opportunity. Are they paying you for that opportunity to work with Express and I assume you mean Next.js? Are they paying you for that opportunity, or are they charging you? Are you doing the work for free, and then they're also, saying, oh, we'll teach you and you have to pay for lessons? Like, there's a lot of variables here that could influence that decision, right? So feel free to share what you want to share. But that's what I would think about is, what does the opportunity look like? Are you getting paid? And what are the prospects for either the stack you're currently working on versus this other stack in your local area? If you look at job listings, what are they asking for, right? So a couple of things to think about there. Definitely. Could be a good opportunity, could be a waste of time. It just depends. Yep. Yeah. There's a really fine line, unfortunately, and I wish it wasn't like this. There's a really fine line between job opportunity and scam nowadays, especially in the tech sector. So really need to make sure that you have the details. If you are being asked to do work, you should be paid. You should have a contract for that work. And it's lovely. If you're being paid and they are going to be teaching you this stuff on the job, then fantastic. Yeah, do it. But if you're doing work for free and they say, oh, this is going to be good for you, you're going to learn this, then yeah, that sounds like BS. That sounds like they're taking advantage of you. So lots of variables. Anyway, so we can handle redirects like this. We can keep our client side exactly the same, um, and route that traffic wherever we want it to go. And Holly says, I mean, learning new things is always good, but for sure you can do it as a side hobby. Go for what pays first since you already have 2 years. Yeah. So, as an example, the stuff I'm doing right now, like, this is my side hobby. I don't get paid for web development. My day job is SQL and pretty much SQL. I do mostly SQL. I do and some C#.net. So what I do here on stream is completely different than what I actually get paid for. So that's why I don't rely on this for any monetary compensation. Like, I just do this because it's fun. And if I ever stop, I always say if I ever stopped having fun, I would never go on Twitch again. Just be like, all right, I'm out, bye. And I would, I wouldn't feel bad about that. And so, yeah, it's important to keep in mind what's actually paying the bills, and you know, weigh your priorities that way. I do this because it's a hobby, it's fun, and I like learning, but you got to think about what's actually paying the bills, or potentially paying the bills. Okay, so we got our redirects here. Um, Now we can test this. I'll admit I haven't tested adding this extra redirect, so we'll see if it actually works. Oh, I shouldn't have stopped the server. Hang on. We'll try it in dev first, and then if it works, we'll deploy it. Oh, and I gotta save all this stuff too. Hang on. Save. Whoop. Hang on. Save. And I don't know exactly what I changed here, but I'm sure it's fine. I think I just added some extra spaces. Oh, we console log the event. Yeah, actually, I don't want to console log that here anymore. And we updated our form action here to route, and hopefully what'll happen here is this will get redirected into the correct function. All right, let's see what happens. I don't normally do things on the fly, but hey, it's all good. Mary. Hey, it still works. So look at that. Yeah. So despite the fact that I am not referencing, I'm just putting a random, I'm just putting a route in my form. That redirect worked exactly as intended to route that traffic to the correct function. That's exactly what we wanted. We send the search route, it goes through my router here, directs the traffic to the correct function, this function runs, and then renders the correct page. So yeah, cool. I'm glad that worked. So yeah, I am going to be updating the rest of my routes to do the same. But for now, they're all hard-coded to the correct function. Okay, so that's an example of essentially the R in CRUD, right? We're doing a read here. Let's see, what time is it? Okay, so we're doing a read here, and let me show you also how to deploy. So I'm gonna kill my server here, and I'm gonna do a deploy of this site from the command line just to show you how that works. I'm sure many of you have actually probably done this before, but if you've never deployed from the if you've never deployed to GitHub and then seen how that connects to Netlify, I can show you here. If my server is going to stop, come on, what are you doing? There we go. That took a hot minute. All right, so I can just do it like a regular commit. Commit m and simplified route, added redirect in toml file. Okay, and we'll push this up to GitHub. And as I do that, if I go back into Netlify here, we'll see in my deploys that it's detected that a change has been made in my GitHub repository. So it is starting up the deployment. And here it's showing me what version is currently published, which is the previous deploy. And it's starting up, and so we can kind of click in here and see the progress of that deployment. All right, so we're initializing, We're building. There's really nothing to do in those two steps, I guess. And now we can see we can see exactly what was changed, right? We can see that I have two redirect rules that were processed. One of them is for the homepage, right? I removed that asterisk there. And then the other one was my new route for the search. So it's telling me exactly what it found, and that looks correct. Two redirects in my TOML file, 7 functions deployed, um, one asset changed in my file, which was my TOML file, and nothing else deployed. All right, so we'll test our production deployment here. Do a quick search. Yep, there we go. We're cooking. So that worked perfectly. And it worked perfectly in part because we were able to test it in dev first, right? We were able to test exactly how those redirects were going to behave, exactly how the whole thing was going to work, because we used the Netlify command line environment, the Netlify dev, to mimic that behavior in a local host before we had to deploy it to a live server. So I would highly recommend that. And it was very helpful for me when I was building this out for the first time. Okay, let me see. Oh, I want to touch on authentication. Yeah, that's the next thing I want to talk about. And then actually probably after that, we'll probably wrap it up. I don't normally end this early, but this week I was on call for work, and we had a massive production, like not an outage, but like a massive production fiasco, I will say. And so I have been awake for way too many nights this week, and I am exhausted. And I actually have something like big that I need to do tomorrow. And if it goes well, I'll tell you about it in 2 weeks. If it doesn't, you'll probably never hear about it again. But I do have something big tomorrow that I kind of got to be ready for. So I I I want to go a little bit shorter than normal. But yeah, we actually had a big production outage at work this week, so I was getting calls multiple nights in a row this week. And if I'm a little bit scattered today, that's why. But I do want to tell you guys the story just because it's really hilarious what actually happened. So we were having like massive packet loss. On our data. So we get a lot of, like I said, I work in data warehousing, right? And so we get a lot of our data via file transfers. Files come in from external systems. We fetch those files from a staging server and then process them into the database. We load them into the database. And we were getting like massive delays in those file transfers. We were getting massive packet loss. Just bad times at Ridgemont High. It was not good. And so we were just struggling through this. We were trying to do everything we could on our side to fix this, to figure out what settings were wrong. We were checking servers, we were checking all these things, and then we finally got the right network guy on the right call, the right troubleshooting call with all of our consultants and everything. And this guy said, "Wait, I want to try something." And he drove to the like the server, like the facility where our servers are, and he went in there and he sent the funniest Teams message I think I've ever received. I'll give you a clue. It was a physical problem with the server. Anybody want to guess what the problem was that was causing, like, you know jobs that should have run for 5 hours to run for 17 hours, and multiple people to be, called in the middle of the night, and huge disruptions to a production environment? Any guesses? Oh, RDT says not plugged in. That's a fantastic guess. I wish it was even that dramatic. Fan issue, raccoons. I like that. All fantastic guesses. Yeah, I wish it was even as dramatic as something not plugged in. Um, Fan issue is another fantastic guess. Yeah, temperature fluctuations can have a huge effect on servers. Definitely not that though. Computer not turned on. 100 megabytes versus 1 gig line. Time zones. Oh man, those are all great guesses. I have seen those things, happen to servers before. The issue was one cable was pulled a little bit too tight, and because it was pulled too tight, it was causing these massive slowdowns in data transmission, and it was causing packet loss. We were getting, lost records, duplicates, that kind of thing. And yeah, it just bottlenecked our whole infrastructure. It was pulled just a little bit too tight, and they were like, "Yeah, we put in a longer cable, and now it's fine." You see, he went in. The guy went in there, and yeah, that cable's too tight. We gotta, or somebody like adjusted it or something, and it got. I don't know if he put in a full new cable or if he just like, you know, took out the crimp or whatever that was pulling it too tight between the source and the destination ports. But yeah, cable too tight. I said, all I want out of this is I just want a picture. Like, what did that look like? How tight was it? Was it like stretched across the room like a clothesline? Like, what was the deal? The vibes were off. Yeah, essentially. Yeah, that was all it is. One cable just needed to be untightened, and then everything was fine. Like, things immediately went back to normal the next night. So, I mean, I'm glad it was simple, but jeepers, it was wild. I just said, well, Jerry in the server room just rolled his desk chair and the cable got snagged and, pulled it a little too tight. Jared, Jared, I love that. They say someone didn't press the turbo button. That is an old school joke. I dig that. I love that. Welcome to the stream, by the way. So, for those of you who don't know, the turbo button actually used to be a physical button on older PCs where you could. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, but the turbo button's primary use was in gaming because you could slow down the turbo button, sort of as a misnomer. You could push the turbo button and actually slow down the clock speed to better play games that were expecting a slower clock speed in the computer, right? So if a game wasn't performing correctly, it was moving, out of sync or too quickly. Without that turbo button, you press that, and suddenly it would sync the clock speed with what the game was expecting. But yeah, it used to be a physical button. You could buy computers with a turbo button. So that's why I love that joke. Polka says, catch exception, console log cable too tight. Yeah, essentially, I wish, man. It took days. Oh, actually, this issue has been going on since June 1st, and we didn't. It wasn't nailed down until what the flip was the end of the week. 14. Yeah, 2 weeks. 2 weeks of this. I wasn't on call the whole time, fortunately. But yeah, 2 weeks to figure out a cable was too tight. So I'm really tired. Anyway, I just had to tell somebody that because I think it's hilarious, and I just want a picture. How tight was the cable? Anyway, let's look at the login. I want to look at authentication. And because there is a couple of unique things about authentication in relation to how we handle authentication with Supabase, and then how we make sure that authentication data persists between our functions, right? Because remember, we talked about before that these functions are essentially independent from each other. So if I use one function to log in, how do I make sure that data, that authentication, the cookie, essentially the session, the information about the session, the cookie, the authentication data, how do I make sure that data makes it into the other functions, and that they understand that this person is logged in? So as a reminder, we are handling authentication through Supabase here. Supabase is able to do authentication natively, which is lovely. We don't have to set up our cookie on our side. I am setting up some local session information for the reasons we're about to talk about, but the actual like token generation, and the actual like checking of the username and password, that's all handled on Supabase's side. All right, so in my login.js function here, again, we have to require the specific modules that we need. We're going to pull in the Supabase JavaScript library. We're going to pull in EJS. We're going to pull in path. Now we're going to pull in a new one here, which is cookie. And if you're familiar with authentication, you know what cookies are, right? The cookies are those things that websites always, bug you about accepting, right? It's tracking data. So we're going to set up our own cookie here. And then since our authentication request is a post request, it's not a GET, it's a post, we're going to need a slightly different way to retrieve that login information from the request, because the body of the request is going to be different than our GET request that we had before. Now, the reason I'm using a post request here is because when you do a GET request in any application, it doesn't have to be in Netlify or whatever, but if you are doing a GET request, say from a form, and let's say you click the submit button on the form with a GET request. What do you usually see, say, in the URL bar of your browser when you do a GET request to submit some data? What do you usually see? I'll give you a hint. We've already done a GET request here, and we got the results, right? So what do you see in my URL bar in the browser? I don't know, it's probably a little small, but what do we see here? We see, yeah, copperly says params. Yeah, we see, exactly the route we're trying to hit. We see essentially all the details of that request, right? We see the last name value, we see the first name value, which we searched for Mary here, so we can see that. Yeah, the input fields. Now, why well, I imagine you can imagine why that might be a bad thing for, login data, right? We probably don't want that showing up in the browser. So if we go here to the login, yeah, and Chrome is going to tell me this is dangerous because the way that I originally had this set up, I was actually doing it as a GET request because I wasn't thinking, and I restructured it to be a post request. But Chrome is still going to say it's dangerous for the next couple days until its bots rescan it. So that's why that's showing up. But it's safe now. So yeah, now you can see that when I did this request, none of that data gets displayed in the URL bar here, right? We don't see any of those input fields. We don't see any of those parameters because this is a post request. And so we want to hide those, right? If we're doing authentication, we don't want to show those to just Joe Schmo. And so we don't want to show any of that data. And so we have to do it as a post request, which means that we have to structure it slightly differently and retrieve that data slightly differently. So we need query string to parse our post request. And then we're going to create our Supabase connection. Again, we're going to set up our function. And then we're going to retrieve the username and password data from, this time, not the same, where were we getting it from before? Let me see. Sorry, not that. Search, yeah, here. Let's see. We're getting that data previously from the event.queryString parameters, but now we're getting it from the event body, and we're using querystring.parse to retrieve it. So if you want to see how this event looks different than our GET request event, you can easily console log just event like we did before, and you'll see that the structure is different. Different things are populated, different things are filled out. It's because it's a put request, it has a different structure. And so this is where we actually retrieve that query data. And then we're just going to pass that data into supabase.auth. And again, this is built into Supabase. So fortunately, Supabase handles this for us. Pass that in. Supabase says, yep, if that person is successfully authenticated, then Supabase is going to return data that includes a token value. So something that we can then use to, instead of having to re-authenticate with Supabase every single time, we can just show Supabase that token and be like, hey, Supabase, I've got a pass. It's like when you go into when you go into a nightclub, right? They stamp your hand if you leave, or they, give you a bracelet, like a festival, they give you a bracelet. And so it's like we only have to go through the check-in once, and then after that, we get a token, our little paper bracelet or a hand stamp, and we can just show that to the bouncer every single time we want to leave and come back in. So it's going to return that, or if they fail the login, it's going to return an error. So if they get an error, we're going to say, all right, try again. Please, contact a library administrator. But if it works, then we're going to go into that data for the session, and we're going to retrieve our token. And then we can use that token as many times as we need to until it expires in order to tell Supabase that we are a valid authorized user. Um, and if you remember from the last time we built this, previously I was not using that token value. I was just setting the value of authentication to true. I wasn't actually using the token value that was returned by Supabase. And so I've updated that to actually use the token that Supabase is providing, because why not? Which is more secure than just setting that Boolean to true. And so after we have the token, like I mentioned before, we have to ensure that that data can be passed between as many functions as needed, right? Because each of these functions are like React components, they're separate from each other. And so if I want to pass that data between multiple functions, I can include it in the headers for each of these pages that I'm rendering. So I'm going to set my headers. I'm going to generate a cookie, and I'm going to pass in the token, and I'm going to give it an expiration date. So this token will expire after 10 minutes, and then when that happens, the user is not going to be allowed to, number one, access the update page, and number two, actually hit the database at all. Because as soon as this token expires, it's going to be trashed. And so even if we did send that request to Supabase, it's, we're gonna make it so that requests can't even be sent to Supabase if this token is expired. It's going to trash the token, can't use it anymore, and the user will have to log in again and get Supabase to send a brand new token, which we can then use for subsequent operations. So we're passing this through in the header, so that way any other page that we're getting requests from, so let's say we they go from the login page to the update page. That's what this is gonna do. It's going to log them in, set the header, send them to the update page, and then include that token data in the header when the page renders. So now, when I send a request from the update page, it's going to include all that token data. So all my other functions that get requests from that page are going to have access to the token. So they can pull it right out of the header. So they can say, oh, yep, I'm going to extract that token. And so if a separate function, has to talk to Supabase, I can pull out that token and send it up to Supabase. So that's how we can kind of pass that around. We're including it in the headers and then rendering out the update page. So from my update page, when I inevitably want to, let's see, I'm going to go to, well, any of these really. Here, we'll look at this one. If I want to search for a specific ID to update, actually, no, I want to do one where I'm actually going to require that token, where Supabase is going to be looking for the token. We'll look at this one. So if I've searched for a record and I've filled in all the fields, and I actually want to then do an update against the database, when I actually update that record in the database. So I'm going to hit this route. And when I do, let's see, when I do, I'm going to extract the cookie from the header, right? Because when the update page rendered, we put that cookie in the header. And so when we get a request from that page, we automatically get the header data, including the cookie and the token. I can just pull it right out, and I can pass it up to Supabase and say, hey, Supabase, I've got this token for you. It's valid. You going to let me do some updates? And Supabase is going to look at the token. It's going to say, oh, yeah, you're the same user that logged in before. Even though you're coming from a different function, it's okay because you have the valid token. You are logged in. And so I'm going to let you do updates against the database. And so that's essentially what we're doing here. So that's how we can pass around that authentication data. Now, if we were working in a traditional server, we wouldn't have to go through all this because it's all in one file, and our server is just, it's all the requests are coming from the same place. that data is just organically shared between all the different controllers. But in this case, we have to explicitly pass that token around via the headers in the page. But it's not too hard to just extract it as we need it. And if you want to go into more detail on this, exactly how this is working, you can look at the GitHub repository, !project, if you need it. You look at the GitHub repository and see exactly, how that's being passed around. And you can even console log the headers if you want to. Console log, see what's being passed around, see what's being included in the event data, because you'll see that the event also includes these headers, including the token. So it's in the event. We can extract it out, save it, send it up to Supabase. And that's how that can work, even though we're in a completely different function here. Okay? All right. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about here. So I think the main takeaways here are if you want to convert your full stack Node Express application to serverless Netlify functions, you'll be able to keep a lot of things the same, but you are going to have to take some things into consideration. You'll need to ensure that you are putting all the appropriate things in your netlify.toml file. This is essentially telling Netlify and telling your functions exactly where everything is that is needed for the app to function, right? So if there's any files outside of the public folder that you want to include, you're going to need to list them here, and what functions they should go into. If you have any redirects, like any routes, you're going to need to make sure you put them here. There's all sorts of other things you can declare in here, even like custom scripts. It's kind of like a package.json file a little bit. You can basically set whatever special configurations Netlify needs to know, and then you'll save them there. You'll need to put your .env variables into Netlify itself. It will ask you for those if you're deploying from GitHub. It'll ask you for those on the first deployment, or if you change them, you'll need to update those. And you'll need to break out each of your controllers into a separate file, just like you would for React components. So break those out separately, and you will need to store them in a specific folder, netlify/functions. That's where it's expecting those to be. And you can see we've got that declared in our build parameter here. So at minimum, you will need this, and you'll probably need a few more things to make sure that you have the correct redirects and that you have all the files that you need in order to make your app work. So start with this. These are all the defaults here. Publish is public, and then functions is netlify/functions. That's where your function should live. And then, really after that, it's just about tweaking your individual controllers to make sure that you are including the correct modules. So things like Supabase, EJS, Path, those types of things, that you're pulling in the correct modules, that you're exporting the function, and then in the end, it's all JavaScript. So you can probably kind of port a lot of things directly over. And then after that, you just run it in Netlify dev in the Netlify command line interface, run it there, and just power through the errors until you've worked everything out. Their logs are pretty decent. As a reminder, if you're running a Netlify dev, you can log things directly to VS Code. If you're running in the deployment version, you can look at the individual function logs in Netlify. Those are really good. And you can add custom logs to the Netlify deploy logs, the function logs. You can console log as much as you want. Those will get written in there too. So pretty convenient, I think. All right. I know we went through a lot today, and it's a brand new concept. So totally get it if, things are confusing or you're not quite sure. But I hope this is at least somewhat illuminating to show how Netlify can be useful for a lot more things than just static sites. Netlify is, of course, fantastic for static sites, but it's even fantasticer when you can host a full stack app on it. All right, so any questions? Feel free to ask. I'm not sure if my chat is frozen or if just everybody's just sitting in stunned silence, which is also fine. Could be either one. That's all right, Copperly. That's totally fine. like I say, this is a brand new topic. Um, and I completely understand if you're like, whoa. This is kind of a thing that you need to experiment with in order to figure out how it's going to be most useful for you. I'm showing you how I've used it, but that doesn't mean that's how you're going to use it. So I would suggest take a full stack application that already works, a Node app, something that you're running in Node with some kind of a backend, could be an API, could be a MongoDB database, could be Supabase, whatever. Um, Take an app that you know works, that's already in production, so to speak, and see if you can convert it to serverless with Netlify functions. Um, Preferably something smaller, maybe something that only has a couple controllers, just create, read, update, delete, or just even maybe only read only, and see if you can convert that into Netlify functions. And yeah, and the best part is it's all free, right? That's the goal, is to give you free options, and this Netlify environment is completely free. And I did, just so everybody knows, when the co-founder of Netlify followed me and retweeted my tweet on Twitter, I did send him a message saying how much I appreciate and how much my viewers appreciate that Netlify has such a generous free tier. Because as we know, a lot of free products are going away. They're either shutting down or they are removing their free tiers entirely. Rip Heroku, right? I think we all miss Heroku. um, Heroku free tier. And so I did thank him directly to say, hey, we appreciate, the generous free tier that you give, how easy it is to deploy things to Netlify. Basically, like, please don't take it away because we love it. And he gave me a little heart on my message. So I hope that did something. Just, I think we should all share, show how much we appreciate these tools when we have them, because otherwise they'll probably get taken away eventually. So, yeah. But hopefully that little heart means that it's gonna, not gonna suddenly get the rug ripped out from under us, because I just learned about this stuff. All right. Well, what we'll do here is I like to spend the last, we'll stop here. I'm not going to go over every single function because honestly, a lot of them follow the same pattern. It's you're, setting up your modules, you're exporting your function, you're doing all the same logic that you would in a controller, and then you are returning the appropriate page or object or results at the end. So that's really all there is to it. Again, if you want to learn more about functions and get some copy and paste examples, Netlify has direct documentation for Netlify functions, but what you're really using under the hood are Amazon Lambda functions. So I'll share the links to that documentation one more time. Amazon's documentation is definitely more thorough because that's essentially what you're using here. But I will give you both if you want to look at it. There you go. So the first one is Amazon, second one is Netlify. That should give you some examples, and obviously Stack Overflow has a lot of examples as well, things you can just copy and paste and try out in your own builds. But like I say, I like to take the last few minutes usually at the end of every stream to just kind of get away from the scheduled content and just talk about whatever you want to talk about or ask questions. Could be about anything, doesn't have to be about this. Usually preferably not about what we just talked about, something different. So yeah, if you have any questions about me or about anything at all, feel free to ask. Again, there's no such thing as a silly question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Every question is valid, and you're probably not the only one with that question. So we'll take a few minutes here at the end, and then we'll probably wrap up in about 20 minutes so that I can do some stuff that I got to do. Hope to have something cool to tell you about in 2 weeks, but we'll see. All right. Let's see. I pushed this up to GitHub, I think. Yeah, we're fully committed. Perfect. Also, too, and if you want to see the finished code, like I mentioned before, you can do !project in chat to see the finished version of this with all the, everything that we just pushed up here. Copperly says, anybody watching House of the Dragon tonight? Yeah, I will. I don't know if I'm gonna watch tonight. I don't know if I'm gonna watch tonight, but I will watch definitely. So I never got into Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones was airing, my coworkers like were super. I was physically, this was before COVID, so I was on site at a location at one point, and we actually like gathered up in the little office to like watch one of the finale episodes. Like during the workday, it was great. But I never really got into the original Game of Thrones. Just the treatment of women and the like the heavy use of like animal fur and stuff. I'm a vegetarian, so like I just wasn't really into that. I'm not super into fantasy either, but I will say I love House of the Dragon. It's different. Like it feels, it's still got the definite vibe of Game of Thrones, like absolutely, but I friggin' love House of the Dragon. I feel like cuz I feel like everybody, like all the characters are equally terrible. Like there's not a, like there's not really, I mean, like everybody's a victim, everybody's a perpetrator. It's like equally, they're all equally flawed, which I love. Um and obviously Matt Smith is Bay, like amazing. And all the actors are amazing. What's the name of the person who plays um, Emma? What's their name? Emma, the who plays the Team Black Queen lady. Um, what's their name? Can't think of it. Somebody knows. I could IMDb it, but that's what I have chat for. But yeah, I love House of the Dragon. It's amazing, fantastic. I will definitely be watching it. That's the first like Game of Thrones related media that's really like hooked me. I like devoured it. And like Patty Considine as the king was so amazing in the first one, like in the first season. Um, just incredible. Yeah, Matt Smith, Patty Considine, Emma Darcy. That's right, that's their name. Yeah, Emma Darcy is amazing. I love Emma Darcy. Um, just fantastic all around. Okay, we got some questions in chat here. Pocus says, I'm calling it now, promotion or new job. Not telling you nothing. You gotta wait 2 weeks. Um, M. Last says, I'm currently on class 27. Should I still continue or skip? Yeah, that's a great question. Like Bagel asked, what are you asking to skip? Are you asking to skip class 27? Or are you asking, like, what is, can you tell me more about that question? I'm happy to answer your question. I just want to make sure I understand. Um, what are you wanting to skip? Um, Holly says, have you tried Deno? I have not. Not yet, no. But yeah, there's always more tools and things to explore, definitely. Bagel says, if my client wants to edit the HTML and Bootstrap code, should I create templates for each element, like a blog card template, an image template, etc.? That way they can copy and paste with all the necessary classes included. It's a decent idea. Yeah. So, one of the principles of good, good clean code is making if you have reusable elements, then preferably they should be modularized and made so you only have to, if you want to change that element, that you only have to change it in one place, right? It's that keep it simple, don't repeat yourself, right? And so if you can avoid repetition in whatever you need to do in order to do that, if it makes sense, then yeah, if you have things like repeatable buttons, repeatable cards, that's actually like one of the defining principles of things like React. Now you're using like Bootstrap, but still it's the same principle. You can, if you are, I don't know if you're using, it looks like you say you're using HTML, but you can, there's lots of different ways you can create these reusable elements, so you can partials, that kind of thing. If you have the opportunity to do that, especially if the client wants to edit themselves, it's going to be a lot easier for them to get it right if they have fewer things to touch. Definitely. Oh, you saw that. Okay. No, I didn't add this. I didn't add this. Uh, this was added automatically by Netlify Dev. So what this is doing is it's essentially grabbing the stuff from Netlify that's needed in order for me to run my application locally. At least that's my understanding of this. As this is, it's pulling this stuff like configs and contexts and edge function information. It's pulling that down from these Netlify URLs in order for my function for my application to be able to be run locally. Yeah. So I didn't add this. This is automatically configured for you, which is nice. When I first initialized my Netlify dev environment. Yeah. You can see it's grabbing all my packages. It's capturing the dependencies, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And thank you so much for the follows. Rin Rain, I missed a few. Sorry about that. Johnny El Melivo, thank you for the follow. Jero, thank you for the follow. Rin Rain, thank you for the follow. And Miss Zansik, thank you so much for the follows, folks. Good to have you all here. Bagel says that makes sense. I'll have to figure that out then. It's my first client site for a high school robotics team. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. They are wanting the website to be easily editable by the students. Yeah, the stack that you use or the tools that you use really depends on the complexity of what you're building, right? How many pages is your site right now? How many individual pages does it have? One thing you could do, Bagel, is you could use a template engine like you could use something like Handlebars or EJS. Like we're using EJS for this site right here. So it looks a lot like HTML, right? But then you can also do some logic in there. And another nice thing that you can do with Handlebars and in Handlebars and EJS is you can build what are called partials, which are like reusable bits of HTML, like cards or buttons, and you can put them in a partials folder. And you can reference them as many times as you need to. Yeah, that's why partials are a good idea if you need to get in there and edit the HTML. Just makes it if you want to change the look of every single button, then you can edit one partial file and it'll change the look of every button. So you could look at using something like EJS or Handlebars to let you use partials, those little reusable components, without having to go convert it all fully over to React or something like that. Yeah, I mean Bagel, or you could put it over to a website builder. There are free website builders out there that you could use as well. Oh, what was the one I found recently? Hang on. Do you guys know, if you're in 100 devs, you probably know about HTML5 up, right? Well, the guy that did HTML5 up, the reason that there's been no updates to that in forever is because he actually has a new project. I'm gonna see if I can find it. Hang on. It's actually pretty cool. I want to show it to you guys. I don't remember exactly what it's called because my brain is like a bowl of oatmeal at the moment. Um, see if I can find it. No, 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 no. No, it's not AI. No, it's a website builder. Um, it's on his Twitter. Hang on. Oh yeah, card.co. So for very simple, here we go. So for very simple, like basic sites, like kind of probably like the one you're trying to build for that robotics team, um, this gives you like a bunch of single page templates, and even like blog templates and stuff. And you can just pick one, and let's see what's a good one here, like something like this. We'll skip that. And it's just a plug and play type of a thing. You can add elements, you can edit elements, and then it even lets you like host them from right in here. Um, so you can pick your template, or you can start from a blank page and drag in elements, customize it however you want, and then you can host it from within this application. You can use a custom domain. You have a lot of options here. Oh, good. Yeah, that's awesome, Bagel. Yeah, card is great. Yep. Yep. Also, too, just as an FYI, and probably many of you already know this, but Netlify also has a website builder. So if you just need to whip up a quick static site for a client, you can build your site directly in Netlify. If you're not great at design, which I know I'm not, I mean, you've seen my applications. Um, if you want to just, you can just straight up build a simple site right in Netlify. Let's say, if you're doing a site for a, I don't know, local HVAC company, right? They need one page. It's got two pictures on it, and it's got their hours and their phone number and maybe a form to submit an email address. Well, just build it in Netlify, host it, buy a domain for $3, and then charge the client for your time. So you got, there's no harm in using these types of tools. You don't, building things from scratch like Bagel. I love that you're doing that project. That's fantastic. It's going to be a great project for the kids. They're going to learn how to build web pages. I wish I would have had that in high school. I wish I would have had someone like you, Bagel, who was, willing to sit down with me and talk me through how these things work. I think I would have gotten into coding much sooner. So mad props to you for doing that. If you were working for, non-educational clients and you just need to whip up a page real quick, there's no harm in using a website builder. Absolutely. Preferably a free one, like Card. No, I mean, genuinely fantastic, Bagel. That you're willing to sit down with them, talk them through it, ignite that spark of technology. Yeah, I really wish I would have had that when I was in high school. That would have been fantastic. So you're giving that opportunity to someone else. Yeah, I'm glad they like your work so far. Definitely. Let me see. Did I think I got through everything else? We've still got a few minutes left. If anybody has any other questions, um, MLAS, if you're still here, I'm happy to answer your question about potentially skipping. But if you can tell me more about what you were asking earlier, I just need a little bit more context. You said you're currently on class 27. Should I still continue or skip? Um, yeah, just what are you trying to skip to? I guess is my question. Are you trying to skip to the next class, or to skip to cohort 3, or what are you skipping there? If you're still here. Also, too, if you're like, hey, what are we talking about classes? What are we talking about? What's all this? Do exclamation point 100 devs in chat. 100 devs is the organization that I am kind of associated with on a volunteer basis. We essentially, it's a nonprofit, and we teach people to go from zero coding knowledge to being full stack web developers for free. There is no cost obligation, and also there is no time obligation either. So you can learn entirely at your own pace. And we have an extremely active Discord, like 60,000 members on the Discord. Extremely active, busy Discord, with plenty of folks ready to help if and when you have questions. Um, so check out 100 Devs if you're interested. Check out the website. Um, and yeah, and you'll see me on the Discord too. I'm a mod there. And yeah, it's genuinely free. There is literally no cost. You can access all the materials for free on YouTube. Um, the channel where the materials are hosted is ad free. My personal channel on YouTube, where all of my archive is also ad free. Exclamation point YouTube if you need that. But yeah, check it out if you're interested. Okay. Spiel over. Bagel says, should I take a break on my classes to better understand JavaScript, or should I keep attending classes and practice JS in my spare time? I'm on class 46. Okay, so clearly you're building stuff, right? You're building some HTML for your website there. Have you built any full stack applications? I'm talking, uh, uh, full stack apps. Have you built any? So class 46, I'm trying to remember. Let me check where that is exactly. What is the most recent JavaScript info you covered? Um, let's look at class 46. What's that? Oh, building a Node app. Perfect. Yeah. So you just did the first. Okay, so you've kind of just gotten into CRUD, APIs, that kind of thing. So have you built a full stack app on your own yet? something that can talk to an API. It has a front end, and then that can, it doesn't have to be an API you built yourself, but has a server, and then sending a request to an API and getting a response. Have you built any of those yet? I know you've probably watched the class, but did you build it? Mm. Yeah. So what I would suggest is, so full stack apps are going to be super important for and I totally get it. Like, get paid, my friend. Like, do your client work, do whatever you got to do. But so full stack apps and knowing how to actually build those apps is going to be really, really important for the rest of the course. So I might suggest a pause there until you actually have the time to sit down and build a full stack app. And to do all, I would suggest do all of the homeworks. Um, do all of the homeworks that are assigned in these CRUD classes. So as far as you've gotten, from the so like from this class here from 37, do make sure you've done all of these homeworks, and that will really help you understand this stuff a lot better. And if you need more prep work, you can go back farther. But yeah, I would suggest maybe a little pause, because if you're not feeling comfortable about working with APIs on your own, and you don't have to build the back end or anything like that. As long as you can build an app to talk to an API, that's going to kind of set you up for the rest of the course. So maybe take a pause until you have time to sit down and do that, and then you can continue. Yeah, and I totally understand it's hard to do it all, and sometimes you gotta pause and not get too far ahead and like just watching the material, because true learning is application, right? True learning, in you aren't ever going to really learn something until you've actually done it yourself and accomplished that task. um, yes, that's a perfect thing. Yes, I love that you said, I agree 100%. I think I'll replace my class watching time with an API project for a couple weeks. Perfect, do that. Yes. um, yep, doing it. Yep. Don't watch any more classes, because you're just going to be watching, right? You're just going to be consuming. You're not going to be doing. And so the important thing is that you're consuming and also doing. And you're doing a lot right now. You're building your client site. You're building a static site. I'm sure that's giving you a better grasp on HTML, just building that site, right? And so now you need to do the same thing, but with full stack. Um, and that'll set you up really nicely. If you need help, if you're having trouble understanding the material and applying it, I have tons of videos in my YouTube archive where we build a full stack app from scratch. Um, I would suggest, oh, on my YouTube page, search for Doggo Generator, Doggo, like dog, like the, slang word for Doggo Generator. That's one of my favorite projects. Ton of fun. And um, that's a good one for, kind of how do we interface with a simple API, like an existing API? How do we send a request to the API, get a response, and then use that data? Um, and I have tons of other great simple API VODs as well. I did a Star Trek API at one point. We've done a lot of API videos. So yeah, take your pick. Check the archive. You can follow along with me, and build it out. Cascade says, I feel like I understand the concepts covered in the CRUD classes, but I still feel lost in trying to build my own. Yeah, that's common. Um, I would first make sure, so Cascade, my suggestion would be make sure that you've actually done the homework, not just watched and felt like you understood, but actually done the homework assignments and got them working, right? For those full stack apps. And because yeah, you can sit down and Leon can explain it, and you can feel like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's so simple, I get it. And then like you look at the code and you're like, I don't get anything at all. Like, how do I actually use this? So make sure you've done the homeworks, and then once you've done the homeworks, the next thing to do is to take one of those assignments and modify it. You don't have to build it from scratch. Just take one of the assignments and add something to it or change something about it. So let's say that you're getting one of the assignments you're getting, maybe you're saving 5 fields to the database. The user fills out a form and it saves 5 fields to the database. And then you're going to modify it and you're going to add a field to the form. You're going to add a sixth field, and then you're going to make sure that you can write that all 6 fields to the database. So that counts because you're going to have to understand how that request passes all the way from the client through the API all the way up to the database and then back, right? So that's a great thing you can do. So just you don't have to build from scratch. There's nothing wrong with taking existing code and modifying it. I do that all the dang time. That's pretty much, what I primarily do for work is you take some existing templates, structures, modify them, add a feature, and then that's your ticket, right? And so try that. That might be helpful for you. Sagama says, so these Netlify functions are analogous to Lambda functions in AWS. Yes. So do I still have that open? Let's see. Yeah. So essentially, that's what you're doing. You are doing AWS Lambda functions in Netlify. Netlify is just facilitating sort of that environment for you. It's helping send your request from your client over to AWS for calculation, and then getting the result. So it's kind of just facilitating the connection. But yeah, you're doing Lambda functions in those Netlify functions are basically Lambda. And you can read more about that in the docs, but that's essentially what you're doing. Oh yeah, Copper Lily. Yeah, that was another fun one too. Gosh, yeah. Fairly recently we built an atlas where we just talked to an API and got information about countries. That's on my YouTube channel. That one was a ton of fun. That one's a little bit more recent, and so it might be a little bit more polished. I love a lot of my older projects and videos, but some of them were a little janky, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with janky as long as it works. But yeah, if you want something a little bit more recent, you could check out where we built an atlas, because all we did was we just hit an existing API and got information about countries. Cascade says, I may or may not have accepted a client project for a CRUD app. That's fantastic. Oh, thank you, Sagama. Um, they're doing postural assignments on clients and want to log affected motions. Okay, yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great CRUD app. So what you can do is, I have a ton of templates for full stack applications. I have multiple on my GitHub. You can do exclamation point GitHub right now. I have tons of templates on my GitHub for full stack apps, for CRUD apps using MongoDB as backend. And I have videos walking you through how to, like, what all the components of those templates and how to use them. Or you can use Leon's template, which is called Binary Upload Boom, which you may not have gotten to that class yet, but he also has a full stack template that you can use. So again, my suggestion would be don't start from scratch unless you really want to, but there's no requirement. Use one of my templates, use one of Leon's templates. That's going to get you off the ground a lot faster. And then you can configure it to have whatever fields and the specifics of what you actually want to do. Yeah. I think my templates, I generally focus on, like, the basic template is just like an input form, where you can input some fields, and write that data to the database and then read that data back. Leon's binary upload boom template also contains a component for photos. So I don't know if you would need to store photos or not, but you could, Leon's template does teach you how to, like, do Cloudinary for photo storage, and then associating that with a record in MongoDB. So it just depends on what your use case is and what the client actually wants to store. That'll kind of determine what template you end up using, I think. But yeah, just to be clear, you should never have any qualms about using a template, whether it's for the front end, whether it's for full stack. I mean, building from scratch is fantastic for learning, but if it's standing in the way between you and money, I would say, man, go with a template every time. I want to get paid. I want to get paid faster and with less work. Cascade says no photos in the MVP downline. Okay, sure, yeah, yeah. Tons of templates to choose from. If you're looking through my YouTube archive and you're like, oh, hey, that kind of looks like what I want to do, all of the stuff on my GitHub is public because I want folks to use it. So, don't worry about, oh, I'm copying Mindwolf's code. No, that's why it's there, because I want you to take it and I want you to do stuff with it and use it to make money. Um, if you do build something cool and you're allowed to share it, I appreciate when people tag me on Twitter just to show me what they built. I always get a kick out of that. But hey, there's no requirement. You don't have to, ask permission or tell me or whatever. Same with Leon. He doesn't care. All the code is, all of his stuff, all his templates, they're out there for you to use and for you to hopefully make money with and establish a portfolio with. Yeah, and the big secret of web development is that pretty much in the end, everything is a full stack CRUD app. No matter how complex it looks, in the end, it's all CRUD. You know, might be some stuff's going to go through Lambda functions, some stuff's going to go through a node server, but yeah, you're it's all about input and output, save and read. The world runs on data, and retrieving and writing that data to storage is really the only thing that ever happens on the internet. But yeah, that sounds like a really cool project. All right, folks. Anything else? Otherwise, I think we're probably going to wrap up here. Thank you, Bagel. Yeah. I'm looking forward to not being on call anymore. Hey, no worries, Renitz. I was almost too tired to stream today, so I feel you, my friend. It's all good. As a reminder, there will not be any stream next week. I have a family thing. Um, but yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing you guys back in a couple weeks. Thank you, Copper Lily. Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of try to look up somebody that we might be able to raid here. Because as you all know, we love to spread some love. And let's see. Doo -doo. All right, let's look up some raid targets, shall we? We've got our friend CM Griffing. Always a fun time. We haven't actually. I think CM Griffing. Thank you, Bagel. The joy of coding. Indeed, it's so much fun, right? It is. Once you can get to the point where, I don't know. My favorite thing about coding is that you've never learned it, right? You're never like, well, I'm done. I learned it. It's like there's always more to do, always more to discover and try and experiment with, and that's my favorite thing about all of this. So, yeah, that's the cool part. It is the joy of coding, definitely. Oh, thank you, Holly. Always great to have you here. All right, so CM Griffin actually did raid us a couple weeks ago, so I think we owe them a raid back personally. But we can take a quick peek here. Doing some Unreal. Got some ASMR programming. That's fun. Thank you for the follow, Manuel. Good to have you here. Good Joe. Yeah. All right. How about let's hit up CM Griffing. Like I say, they raided us a couple weeks ago. I think we should raid them back. We'll check them out. Also, too, before we do the raid, I don't expect anyone here is going to have any issues, but I do want to just give a general reminder that when we raid someone else, we're doing it to spread good vibes. We're doing it to spread, the positive aspects of this wonderful community that I have here in chat that, I am always grateful for every single time, that you all are, decent people who are helping each other and lifting each other up and being positive towards each other. So when we raid someone else, no matter who that is, I expect that if you are coming from my stream as a raider, that you're going to represent the values and the same vibes that you kept here in chat, that you're not going to behave differently or in a negative way towards the person that we're raiding, because that is not the point of raids. Yeah, we had an incident last week where someone from this stream was not behaving in a manner in which I felt was a good representation of our community. I called that person out. They know who they are. I don't think they're here this week, but um, just putting it out there. Um, right. I was not afraid to call them out because they were not behaving in a good way. And I don't expect any of you would do that, but I did want to just say so. I don't think it shouldn't have to be said, right? But here we are. So, no, it wasn't you, Holly. Absolutely. This person knows exactly who they were, and we don't have to discuss it, but this person knows exactly who they were because I called them out by name and I told them to quit it. So I'm confident that they have taken that information and they won't do it again. But just as a general announcement for the community, don't do that. Cool? Be nice. Great. All right. Let's raid CM Griffin and enjoy whatever they're working on today. They're doing an open source side project. Cool. All right. Let's hit them up. Thank them for the raid last time. I'm probably going to drop right off. Uh, but yeah, enjoy their stream. All right, we're gonna rate them now, and I will see you back here in 2 weeks. All right, have a good couple of weeks, folks. See ya. All right, raid is starting in 10 seconds. Thank you, Laylo. Good to have you here. Thank you, Holly. Alrighty, bye bye.